All right, this is going to be my Deepface Lab tutorial video that I've been talking about doing for a while. I had a few requests by people for me to go over the process that I use to make a deepfake using Deepface Lab. So that's what we're going to get started with today. Hopefully this will be a useful guide to anybody who watches it. I'm going to try to break it up into chapters. It'll all be one video that'll upload at one time, but I'm going to try to break it up into kind of segments where we talk about each kind of individual step, and hopefully that'll be useful to anybody who watches this. If there's any questions, of course, ask them in the comment section below. I'm sure there will be no end to questions at various steps. It's fine. Ask whatever you got. If anybody throughout the video sees me saying something they don't think is correct, like if other people who make deepfakes watch this and think I'm wrong about something, go ahead and correct me, or at least we can talk about it. But that said, give me a second here and we will get started with the video. If you haven't already done so, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Thanks. Okay, so I've written up kind of a step-by-step guide and a little document here that we're going to go through kind of, again, step at a time. And each one kind of covers, how you get the software, what hardware I think you should be using, what other software you're going to need besides the Deepface Lab software. Deepface Lab is free, but there's other software out there that you're going to need that may not be free, like video editing software. There's probably free versions out there you can find. I'll leave it up to you to decide what editing software you want to use. But I guess I'll go ahead and start at the top here. So like the kind of hardware that you can use to make a deepfake, I would recommend, of course, something from the NVIDIA RTX 3000 series, but you can use AMD cards, but they are much slower. It's just something to do with the fact that NVIDIA has done more work with neural network kind of things. And I'm not going to pretend to understand all the technology behind some of this stuff. So, I'll explain it as best as I understand it, but it doesn't mean that I know everything. So I'm probably going to make mistakes or just something I say might be wrong, but ultimately I understand the process of making a deepfake. I would call myself an advanced end user of deepfake software, but it doesn't mean that I know how, like, what every little setting is doing. I can like watch it and say, oh, I see that it did that. But as far as how it performs, it's, I don't know how everything works. That said, RTX 3000 series is the way to go if possible, but also AMD is an option. The minimum, I believe, that they recommend is at least 4 gigabytes of video memory. I would say closer to 8, really, if you want to be able to do anything that's going to be halfway decent, because Windows uses a good chunk of your video memory. If you've only got 4 gigs, it's already using, a gig and a half of memory. You're gonna have so little left that you won't have much to dedicate to DeepFaceLab. You'll only be able to do low resolution models, which won't be very convincing. So your call. Obviously, it's hard to get GPUs right now. Work with what you got, but those are the recommended, like an RTX 3060. Honestly, like if you can get one of those, they have 12 gigs of video memory. Even though they don't have very many CUDA cores, they're not super fast. It's a nice entry level card. If you could get one at MSRP between, like, let's just say $400, if you could get one for that price, which is like, I think the Founders Edition and the original, like the cheapest EVGA versions are like 329, but let's just say $400. That would be like the point of entry from the NVIDIA side. And then the cards higher than that, you figure like the 3060 Ti, 3070, 3080 all have 8 or 10 gigs, which you can again work with, but you can't turn up. We'll discuss batch sizes later, but basically you can't turn up the batch file very high with that. And if you can't turn up the batch file very high, it's going to take it a long time, and your results may not be that great. So whatever, work with what you've got, but at least 8 gigs would be good. 12 is better. And then if you can get like I say, something with like 16 or 30, 24 gigs, like a RTX 3090 has, of course, 24 gigs. AMD's cards, all like the 6800, 6800 XT, and 6900 XT, all have 16 gigs of video memory, and that's enough where you can do quite a fair amount with that. But even then, like getting into the higher resolution models, you'll burn through video memory super fast doing this. So just understand that video memory is like king here, along with lots of processing cores on your GPU. The CPU matters to some degree. There are certain stages during training or other thing, like not necessarily training, but like extracting faces from a video, for example, where like a high number of CPU cores will be beneficial, but CPU is not nearly as important with this as the GPU is. So, like we discussed, video editing software like Adobe Premiere Pro, which is what I use, Cyberlink Power Director, I've used that in the past, and that's fairly inexpensive, usually like a one-time purchase, like maybe $80 or something. Sony Vegas Pro is popular with some people, so things like that. There's also like Adobe After Effects and some things that I don't fully understand how people are utilizing those because I don't even know what those software packages do specifically, but I know that like After Effects is something that some people use to make some interesting additions to their videos after they've already trained the deepfake, because you can take that deepfake output and then you can go ahead and throw that back in your video editing software and add other effects to it. That's how I've done like mirrored effects, where it's like when I did the Batman video that shows like Michael Keaton looking at Christian Bale. It's like I used the original footage and the deepfake footage in the same video, and then I have, I crop it out and do things to align it and make it look like he's looking at himself. So you can have more fun after you've made the deepfake by editing the video more. Other software like AI upscaling software, like I have, if I can find it, like I have Gigapixel AI from Topaz Labs to upscale images from lower res to higher res, and Topaz Sharpen AI. Frankly, I don't think they're very good. There's other software out there that's apparently better. There's one called like Ramini or something. I haven't actually gotten that to work because I think it only works on mobile devices, but there are ways to use it within Windows apparently as well. But anyways, sharpening software, upscaling software that can make your source images look better if you can't find good source material. Those can be helpful, and sometimes Sharpen AI does an okay job, but quite often it makes the image look worse in my opinion. So those are options, but not required. You will need some kind of screen capture software, potentially. It depends on if you're going to use, like who you want your deepfake character to be. Now, because we're going to be using Lori Lightfoot, who is the mayor of Chicago, and then Michelle Obama, those two aren't in any movies or anything like that, so I couldn't find like a Blu-ray and rip it. Their footage is on YouTube. I could probably find it on streaming on other sites, but I use OBS or Shadow Play, and AMD has the AMD Relive software, and I'm sure there's plenty of other screen capture software packages out there, but OBS is free, so that's one you could use whether you have AMD or Shadow Play, and you can screen capture, a YouTube video, and then when you save that, you can then extract images that way. I've done a lot of my characters that way. I've had people tell me they think that's the word that was used was barbaric, because you get better quality if you use like a Blu-ray rip. But again, if I want to do Lori Lightfoot is not on Blu-ray, so I have to go where the source footage is. So OBS, good call for capturing the character that you want to use out of a video. Next, they have what they call the RTM face set. This is something that I didn't know about until like maybe a month ago, but it's available on GitHub. I'll supply a link and kind of explain what it is, but it's a large pack of like 63,000 images that you can train your character against to get your character. The model learns different facial expressions and lighting conditions and so forth, and the RTM face set contains a bunch of different faces and so forth, that it allows your model to get kind of a diverse learning of various faces that way. So I'll show you guys kind of what that involves here in a little bit, but that's something that you may want to get, and again, that will be supplied in the link. We went over the hardware, NVIDIA being superior for neural network training. So AMD is possible. As you guys may remember, I have that, well, I had to send it back. I'm waiting for my replacement from AMD, but I have that AMD Pro W6800 with a 32 gigs of memory. I bought that so I could do, like the super high-end 640 resolution models, because at the time you couldn't do that on a 3090. It seems that maybe now the software's become efficient enough with video memory usage that it doesn't use as much, because now I've been able to actually train one on my 3090. Not again mentioning batch sizes, but I can't turn up the batch size very high at all, but you can do it, and over time it will work. It just takes longer. but you can get the result. So you can do it with a 3090, but the AMD is an option if you certain workstation cards like that 6800 Pro or high end like the 6900 XT would probably be doing an okay job, but AMD doesn't make anything with a comparable core count. Like an RTX 3090 has like 10,300 some odd CUDA cores. The highest number of core count on any AMD card, the 6900 XT, is like 5,000 short shader cores. So not only does it have like half the cores, but AMD supposedly just isn't as efficient for this. So just bear that in mind. RTX 30,000 series if possible for the hardware. 2000 series, like 2080 Ti is still a good card. It's got 11 gigs. So if you can get one of those, a little older, but if you can pick one of those up, they still do a really good job. RTX Titan, I used one of those for a while. Yeah, these are very expensive cards. I understand that all this is big money, so money, sorry, is what it is. Explain certain steps. Yes, okay, so we talked about, different stages of the training, sometimes benefiting more from like a higher core count, and sometimes it benefits more from like a higher clock frequency. So like there's something we're going to be doing called XSeg mask training. And XSeg mask training, I've noticed when it trains the mask, a higher clock speed seems to benefit that a bit more. I'm on my i9 system right now with my 3090 in it. We're going to be working with that. And because the 11900K has a high clock frequency, it's not very, very many cores compared to my Threadripper system, but the high clock frequency, it seems like when I XSeg train, this system does quite a bit faster than if I did it on my Threadripper system using the same GPU. I mean, overall, it's not a huge difference, but like it's noticeable. So, but versus that, when you go to like finally complete your model, they have what they call the SAEHD interactive merger window, and that uses more CPU cores from what I can tell, because my Threadripper tends to do a much better job with that, whereas the i9 actually, it doesn't hang per se, but like you can tell like it's taking a while to process at certain points. Like it'll kind of get stuck, like a little hourglass, and you have to wait for it. Whereas the Threadripper, although that can still happen, it's much better at keeping pace with that process than the i9 is. So without further ado, we'll move on here to the next step where we'll start downloading the Deepface Lab software. All right, so there's a couple different places you can acquire the Deepface Lab software from, two different repositories that I'm aware of. The first would be from the GitHub site, and you come down to this magnet link, and when you click on that, you'll need like a torrent client downloader like uTorrent or BitTorrent to download the software. But when you click on this link supplies all versions of Deepface Lab, so you can get either the DirectX 12 version to use with AMD cards. You can also get the 2080 Ti version. So there's a version that works with 2080 Ti and predecessor cards from NVIDIA. So like if you had a GTX 980 or a GTX 1070, you would use the version that goes up to 2080 Ti. And then there's a version specifically for RTX 3000 series cards. So you have those options. I'll go ahead and open that up. Even though I've already downloaded it, I'll just go ahead and show you guys what options you get. Okay, I apologize, but I had to redo this last section here because uTorrent likes to show ads in it with movie clips in it, and I'm trying not to get a copyright strike, so we're just going to have to hope that you can figure out how to use uTorrent or BitTorrent. But basically, you click on this link, you pick which files you want, which is going to give you the DirectX 12 version. It's going to give you the predecessor all the way up to 2080 Ti version for NVIDIA cards. There's the RTX 3000 version you can select, and there's the RTM face set. The RTM face set's about 10 gigs. The 3000 series RTX version is like 3.5 gigs. The DirectX 12 version is a smaller file set. I think it's like a gig. I can't remember, but it's smaller. And so you have the 2080 Ti version, I think is about the same size as the 3000 series version. So you have some options there. It'll take a little while to download, but I've already downloaded mine. Or the other option is you can use this mega link where you can come here and you can see it doesn't have the RTM face set in here because Mega limits your downloads per 12 hours to like 5 gigabytes per 12 hours. So you wouldn't be able to download the whole thing. So you've got to get RTM here if you want the RTM face set. and you can download any version of Deepface Lab from here if you prefer. So again, we mentioned DirectX 12. I guess it's bigger than I thought. It's 2.6 gigs, and then the RTX 3000 series current version is November 20th, 2021. He'll probably have something out pretty soon because he does something close to once a month. There'll be something new that comes up. So 3.6 gigs for that, and about 3 gigs for the RTX 2000 or 2080 Ti and predecessor build, so up to that card. So those are your options for software. I have already downloaded and acquired, if I could find it. There you go. Why does it act like uTorrent is still running? I don't know what uTorrent is doing. Let me refresh that. See, it's still acting like uTorrent is running. I don't like uTorrent right now. But anyways, so this is what it'll look like. You'll get the RTX, in my case, RTX 3000 series build. All of them look the same, though, when you unpack them, until you get into what they call, like there's an internal Python folder that contains different code that you shouldn't need to screw with as someone who's just messing around with making a deepfake, unless you want to make some edits later on. Like more advanced stuff could be done in there, but as far as just making a deepfake, you don't need to go in the internal folder, and that's where the differences are at, because like this version and the 2080 Ti version have all the CUDA libraries, and AMD only has DirectX 12, so it doesn't have the CUDA libraries. That's basically the difference in the file size right there. So next thing up, we'll go ahead and go over extracting this and what you do once you do that. So give me 1 second. I'm going to kill uTorrent again. All right, so let's go ahead and extract this out. It'll give you a message about how it thinks it's unsafe. Tell it to shut up. And you'll just say more info, run anyway. And we're going to pick where we want this to go. So I'm going to say I just want to put it in my D drive and extract. And that'll run through that process, which shouldn't take it too long. All right, it's finished extracting, and we have Deepface Lab NVIDIA RTX 3000 series folder. And within that, and you can rename that folder anything else. As you can see, I've got lots of different folders where I've named it something else. Like this is something I was trying to train Christian Bale against himself. Let's just see what would happen. One of the Batman ones I'm doing, some of the other ones I'm screwing around with. So anyways, drive space, you're going to need like upwards of 100 gigs to do this, depending on how big it gets, but like a minimum of probably like 50-60 gigs to dedicate to just this. Like this particular set of folders is, how big is that? It's 7.5 gigs, which isn't that much, but once you start extracting videos and images and so forth, it gets big really quick. And then as you train the model, it gets bigger that much faster. So we've got our software extracted. So now next thing we're going to do is talk about different batch files that are in here and what they do. All right, we're going to go over these batch files and different things. So this is the internal folder that I mentioned that contains Python code and the CUDA libraries and different things like that, but you shouldn't really need to mess with that too much. If you want to start screwing around with like manually updating certain Python code, you can do it there. I have messed with that a little bit, but as far as you shouldn't need to mess with that folder at all, really. Sometimes, like if you have a power outage or something, and you end up with like a corrupted issue, like where you're having problems getting your model to train, you might want to replace that with like so keeping like a copy of this folder, like you should back all this stuff up, or you have your downloaded copy so you can extract it again if you want, but sometimes just like deleting this folder and replacing it will resolve certain issues if you get, again, like a corrupted issue. Keep that in mind. So keeping that around is helpful. Workspace is kind of where you're going to do all your different actual work. It comes with a destination and a source video supply. So you've got like this would be using Robert Downey Jr. and transposing his face onto Elon Musk. So this comes with these pre-supplied to you if you want to just like practice, basically. So honestly, that's not that bad of an option, but I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna do my own, so I'm gonna delete those out. But again, that's what you're gonna name. Just let me bring that back. So you'll have a data source, and a data underscore DST. So source and destination is our two MPEG-4 files. I don't know that this works with MKV or anything else. I'm pretty sure they got to be MPEG-4. So this will let you, if you want to start fresh and get rid of all these folders without manually deleting things, you can just run clean work source or clear work source. It'll wipe all that stuff out. Extract images from data source. So once you have your data source MPEG-4 file, you run this and it will extract each individual video frame and it will place those in here. And then later the align folder is for when you extract the faces from those individual frames of video. So we'll come back to that, of course, when we actually do it. There's going to be some things here, I don't even know what the heck they do. Like cut video, drop video on me. Don't know what that does, have never touched it. So we're just going to skip past that for now. Extract images from the destination video, full FPS. So this will pull, again, every frame of video out of your destination video. And like the other one, it will place them here in this main portion. Then you have the align folder for your faces. Optional denoise of destination images. So he's got some tools in here, like we talked earlier about sharpening software. So this will do like a denoise filter on your destination images if you want to run that. I've not screwed with it really, so I don't know how good of a job it does, but that's an option to try that. Data source face set extract options. So manual lets you go through and manually tell it where the faces that you want to use from each frame of your video. This can be useful if you have, like if you took source video of somebody that you want to get, but there's a bunch of other people in the video. I try to crop all that out from video editing so I don't even have to screw with manually doing it, but you can go through and just manually pick the guy you want out of each frame of video. It's a little bit more time consuming, but you can get sort of better results doing it. We'll go over that eventually here on how to manually align, like how it quickly, or how it can take the face out of a frame of video as opposed to letting it just do it through automation. But this is the automated version, so it just says face set extract. This will just run a little batch file and it will go through every frame of video in that source images and it will pull the faces out of all of them. And sometimes it makes mistakes, which is why, like I say, manual can be better in some degree. If it's a really straightforward video and the guy is just looking at the camera the whole time and he's not deviating and he's not getting obstructions in front of his face that cause problems, like he doesn't put his hand in front of his face or something, and he, you know, pretty much just talking to the camera, or maybe he turns his head a bit in one direction or another, but overall straightforward, letting it do it automatically is fine. In fact, it does a really good job, and it does it pretty fast compared to how you could do it manually, but it still will take a while. If you have, let's just say, like 10,000 images, you'll be waiting a bit, like maybe an hour to get your faces extracted. So that could take a while. View source aligned result. This is like a batch file that literally brings up the folder aligned. So I don't know why. It's sort of like a redundant thing, because you can just go in here and look at the source aligned, but this pulls it up in more of like a little application or something, but it does the same thing. I think it gives you some options for copying and pasting and so forth, but source sort, I've never screwed around with sorting. I think it just puts them in numerical order, which seems sort of redundant. I've not messed with that and didn't need it. There's going to be things here I don't know what they do because I haven't needed them for anything. So I apologize if I don't have explanations for some of these batch files, but I've been doing this for over a year and I haven't needed them, so they must not be ultra important for me for doing this. Add landmarks, debug images. Okay, haven't played with that. Source face set enhance. So this is like, again, we talked about AI upscaler. That will kind of add some sharpening to your source images. It does a pretty good job, honestly. I've done it a few times, but it does take a very long time. And maybe that's because it's doing a better job. Like maybe it takes a lot of passes at it or something. But I've used that, and sometimes it isn't really noticeable. But I've never seen it do a job that made it look worse. Like with Topaz, I've had, again, fishy results where quite often it looks pixelated or doesn't look nice. This almost invariably makes it look better, at least. So that's as good or better, but it does take a long time, and that will improve anything in the aligned folder. Then that will create what's called an aligned enhanced folder where it puts all those images, and at the end you can tell it to overwrite your original ones with the enhanced ones. The metadata save, metadata restore. This will save like XSeg data if you then have to delete an image and then restore it later. I haven't screwed with those really. I haven't needed them, but those are an option for like, there's certain things, again, like XSegging is something we'll go over later, but if you, uh, I think if you like take an XSeg image out of your line folder and put it somewhere else, and you like do a sharpening filter on it somewhere else or do some things else to it, and then you put it back in your line folder, like it will forget that that's a proper Deepface Lab image, and this lets you restore like the XSeg and extracted information for it. Haven't played with it, so don't need it necessarily, but there's probably scenarios where it could be useful. You might have to ask in like a Deepface Discord server or something. Maybe I can find out that information, then later add it to the comments. If anybody has a question about it, ask in the comment section. I'll try to find out more about it. I personally have not needed it, so again, one of those things. Face set pack and unpack, and then resize. So starting with, I guess I'll start with resize. If you want to change all the images in your line folder to a different size for some reason, so let's say you extracted them at like 1024 by 1024 pixels, but you want to reduce them down to like 512, this will resize every image in the aligned folder to whatever you tell it to align it to, or what size you tell it to change it to. So that can be helpful if you want to make them all uniform. Like if you added some images later that were like 1024 and you want to bring them down to what everything else is, you can do that. Face set pack. This is really nice. This is handy later on, especially if you have a really large face set. When you go to start training your model, and you have like 10, 12, 15,000 images or something, it takes a little while for it to load all that stuff up. Whereas if you make a face set pack out of it, this will take all the images in your line folder and it basically puts them in something, it's called a pack file, but it's kind of like a zip file or an archive file. And it just puts them all in one file together, and then it deletes all the images, but you can unpack it again later to get the images back. It just makes it into one file. It also makes it nice so you can transfer it from like one drive to another, because one large file seems to transfer a lot better than a bunch of small files. So you can transfer or all of them into a faceit pack, and then when you go to load up your training later, it will load almost instantaneously as opposed to waiting like several minutes. So faceit pack's really nice. Once you've got your source images, aligned, you've done your XSeg masking, you've done your XSeg training, which we'll get to in a second. Once everything with your source images is where you want them to be, I make a source or a faceit pack out of it, and then you can load it much faster when you want to train with it. So that's really nice. Let's see. So what we got down here, this is something we'll almost kind of have to come back to and talk about a little bit later, but basically, well, okay, so this is like, again, with the source, you can extract automatically or manually for your destination, and depending on if there's anything obstructing the face. With destinations, I quite often will do manual extraction, because anything I'm trying to do that's sort of complicated, where there's, again, like something flies in front of the guy's face, you're going to want to manually extract it so you can get a better alignment on it, because the automated one will quite often just screw up when there's anything in front of the face, and you'll get like this gobbledygook result, which isn't what we want. We don't want gobbledygook. So face extract and manual fix. That might be a new option. I don't think I've seen that before. Manual fix. All right, I'm gonna have to come back to that one. I haven't actually played with that, so that's another one to talk about later, I guess, because I'm not sure what they're referring to with a manual fix. Now what this one lets you do is if for example you use the automatic extraction and you ended up with a bad result, you can go into what's called the align debug folder and delete the bad alignment and have it run this, and it will let you manually re-extract it to improve the result and try it again. So that's very useful. I gotta try that later and see what that does. So neat. Okay, more view align results like we talked about before, like it brings up the little application and lets you see your destination align results. Same things here, faceit, pack, etc. Depending on how long your destination video is, making a faceit may or may not be all that important to you, especially if you're going to go back and maybe add more to it or edit those images more, XSeg them more on a regular basis. Making a faceit pack may or may not be all that valuable. But recover original file name. Again, like this is something else. I don't know what that would be useful for, or what that even does. So another one, not sure. Okay, getting into the XSeg section. See, we've still got a few more to go here. There's quite a few batch files. Some of them, again, I just have never had any use for. Probably very niche scenarios in which you'd actually have to use it. But so XSegging, like, well, I'll show you how to do it manually here later. So it's like, you'll see what this does. But XSegging kind of specifically spells out to Deepface Lab what the face is in an image. So like you trace around, like if you manually do it, you would go trace around the face. With like, there's an application that allows you to bring up every image. You trace around the face with your mouse basically, and try to be very accurate as to, the edges of the face. And you do that, X number of times, whatever seems like that's going to work for you. And then you train it, and it will apply that. And that, like I say, definitively spells out to Deepface Lab when you go to train your model later where the face is, because sometimes the face is kind of the same color as the background, and so you'll get like weird bleeding and so forth if you don't do this. So that gives you the option. Generic, though, we'll try to do a best guess job just by running this bash file. It's pretty fast, and it's pretty good, actually. If you don't have obstructions in front of the face, and again, like it's just somebody talking to the camera and there's not a whole lot going on, generic XSeg does a really good job. But if you have a lot of action sequences where there's something constantly going on and motion blur and things like that, these don't do a particularly good job, and you should manually do it. So those are the two options there. So destination mask edit lets you pull up that application so you can manually XSeg your destination images. Mask fetch, I don't know what it does. Mask remove would remove the applied mask, I imagine. So maybe fetch allows you to apply it back on again. I haven't played with fetch, and I haven't really used remove either. I just make edits to it if I want to, or I can, whatever. But this will go through and delete XSegging that you've done to your destination. And then we have okay, so after you train XSegging and it's where you want, you come up and you hit destination mask apply, and it will apply your training to your model. Yeah, so again, mask remove. Oh, train mask removed. Now, so like I say, honestly, some of these I never even looked at them because it's just like they don't ever come up. I don't need them. So source mask, edit, same scenario, edit the source mask. Fetch, remove, I haven't screwed with. Apply, same thing. After you train it, you would apply it. And again, you can remove it if you want with this. I don't know, like I say, some of these things I haven't really had any use from, so I apologize. XSeg train, as we said, once you've gone through and manually traced out enough of the images, you tell it to XSeg train, it pops up this little utility that shows the constant comparison of faces. I will do that later so I can show you guys how to do it, and you'll be able to watch the results improve over time. Okay, so this isn't something we're gonna worry about today. This is like for DeepFaceLab, this is how you export a trained model to be used in DeepFaceLab. A DFM file is the model that DeepFaceLab recognizes, but we're not worried about that. AMP, we're not going to talk about today. We're not doing AMP models. We're doing SAEHD models. So we're not going to worry about anything with AMP. We're not going to worry about Quick 96. A Quick 96 model is a 96 by 96 pixel model. I don't even think it has certain options like SAEHD or AMP has. It just has very basic options to allow you to make a quick generic deep fake at low resolution, but we're not doing that. Train SAEHD, so that's where we'll actually train our model, and I'll go over that and how that works. There's a bunch of settings in that too. Isn't that surprising? Everything has a bunch of settings. So merge AMP, merge Quick 96, merge SAEHD. The only one we're concerned with is the SAEHD again, but this is when you finally combine your model with your destination footage and kind of basically, you're kind of trying to blend it into it. And again, I'll show you guys how to do that manually. Merge to AV. Okay, so after like you've done this and it's finished, you have the option to export it to a couple different possibilities. You can make an AVI file. You can make an MOV lossless file, MPEG-4 lossless, or standard MPEG-4. And you also have some other things here that are miscellaneous that I guess will let you just tell it to run everything on CPU. That would be extraordinarily slow. I would not screw with it. And then EBSynth, there's a channel called Joel Haver who does EBSynth animated videos. This basically comes with the EBSynth utility if you want to mess with that. I've never used it in the production of deepfakes, but I have messed around with it for other things, but not something we're going to mess with today. So I apologize for not knowing, honestly, what some of these things are for or do, because they have never been valuable to me in anything that I've done. And you won't need them either, as far as I could tell, with what we're going to do today. And for basic deepfaking, definitely won't need some of those things that we mentioned. But next step up in our list after this should be how to get footage. So next up, we're going to go and talk about how to get footage off of YouTube. We kind of talk about that with Make MKV and so forth, but I'll show you guys kind of what I do for that. So 1 second. I saved some different links. Let me jump back over here to Lightfoot of Chicago. So let me mute that. But she's on here trying to, give us a line of BS about something. But anyways, this is fairly close to the camera. She doesn't have any obstructions in front of her face. That's a problem I've had with doing deepfakes of women, is that a lot of them will have like long bangs, and you'll see like it'll cover up like part of her eyebrow, or like, depending on what way her face turns, like it kind of swooshes in front of the face and becomes a bit of an issue to get good source material. And so things like people with short hair like this, or where it's pulled back or something, it's a little bit easier to work with. So Lori, that's again like a source image of her, but you can see some of this video doesn't have, this would be useless. It's too far away. It's low res. It's not particularly great. Come back here, jump further in. So, you can get good visibility on her teeth are pretty clarified. Her eyes are pretty clear, etc., etc. She's not juking all about and making motion blur. So it looks like there's only kind of a little bit in this video. But anyways, this is the kind of stuff I would use for fairly basic footage of a character I want. Now I want her to be looking in different directions, and different lighting conditions and so forth is important if you are going to deepfake onto another character who's in a different lighting scenario. So like if they're in a dark area or something, it's good to have footage of them in a light scenario, in a dark scenario, looking left, looking right, up, down, mouth movements, talking, just trying to find footage of that person looking all over the place. The more varied your source imagery, the better job it can do of applying that to a destination video. So that's our footage of Lori. Like I said, I've got several others, and you use something like OBS to screen cap and get these, get these different video files, and then you can use a video editing software like Adobe Premiere or whatever to splice them all together to get just footage of that person. So I'm going to do that kind of my own accord here, and I'll come back when I've kind of compiled these into what looks like kind of a useful scenario in my Adobe software. So 1 second, I'll come back. All right, so we've got footage of Lori here kind of chopped up. This is from some speech she did. That's about a minute some odd. Then she's not super close to the camera, but something you got to worry about is getting them looking more or less in the direction of the camera. And some of these interviews that you find, she's kind of looking in one direction the whole time. So for our purposes today, it's fine. And then she's got something she's doing on here talking about everybody getting vaccinated, and then she was on some other interview I found. Some of the footage is better than others. Try to get stuff with her looking in different directions. The only problem I'm really having is finding her like at a straight up side profile, where she's looking literally to the right or the left entirely, where you'd only be able to see like the side of her face. I'm sort of having a hard time finding anything like that of her. So I'll be sort of limiting what I'm going to be doing with Harris as well, so at least we'll know that it'll work. I don't want to do like side profile of Harris if I have no side profile of Lori. So you can see, go through here. She's got an interview here going. Pretty good HD footage on a lot of this stuff. Like 1080p stuff, so it's not bad. You see, I just screen capped it from YouTube. And here's another one. She's doing some other interview. So, you get the idea. I've just cut out the things that weren't relevant or whatever, other people from it, like the interviewer in this one. I just cut out the interviewer from it. Don't need to see both people. And here, like, she's the only one in it the whole time. So this will be an excellent automatic face extraction. Like I said, this only shows her the whole time, and that's why I tend to edit it like this ahead of time, so that I don't have to worry about using like manual extraction for source characters. I can just hit a button and let it go for half an hour or something, or however it takes. This is about 3.5 minutes of, yeah, about 3.5 minutes of footage of Lori times 30 frames a second. That's a lot of frames of video. So we're going to get a fair number of faces here, and this should be more than enough for what we're going to do today. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and export this, and then I will go ahead and do whatever I want to do with Harris, and we'll get those created, and we'll start screwing around with extracting images. So give me 1 second. Okay, so you can see our file has finished exporting, and I've placed it in the workspace folder. So if we come in here and go to workspace, we've got destination, source, model, and now we have this MPEG-4 file that I've created. I'm going to name this file data_src. This is our source material of Lori Lightfoot, as we discussed, and you can kind of see once again Lori chit-chatting about whatever the hell she's talking about. So that's our first step. We've got our source material more or less ready to extract and work with. I'm going to go ahead and produce the Harris footage and make a data.dst MPEG-4 file, which we'll work with next. So give me 1 moment and I'll get that going. All right, so this is going to be like a short, stupid, like 12-second thing. But again, we're just doing this for practice. We don't have to go crazy with it. So this is some interview she did with some kids, and I've kind of just chopped it out so it sounds funny, but I sometimes think it's more fun. But this will be right here. You can see where the word mean is overwriting her face a little bit. This will be an opportunity we can go over how XSeg editing works when you have to manually do it, because if we don't tell it to ignore the word mean in the training, it will simply become part of her face and kind of blend out, and then it will appear to be behind her face, because basically Lori Lightfoot's mask will be overwritten onto her and it will overwrite the words. So if we don't tell it ignore this portion of the mask, we don't want that to be part of our training, then it will just kind of cut off at the E there, and it'll be not being me instead of not being mean. So anyways, that's our Harris of footage, our footage of Harris. I'm going to go ahead and export that, and we'll change that to data.ds_dst, and then we'll get started on actual extraction and so forth. All right, so our file's exported. We're going to name this data_dst. And so now we're pretty much ready to sort of get started on things. So the next thing I'll be doing is extracting the images from both, and then we can extract the faces from both and go from there as to, XSegging and starting to train a model. So next thing, I'll go ahead and start extracting these images. All right, so we've got extract images from video data source. We're going to start that up. It's going to do what's called caching your GPU kernels. After you've run it once, it won't have to do that again. Telling it 0 FPS means it's going to extract at the full frame rate of whatever the video was recorded at. So we'll go ahead and leave that. Leave it for PNG for better quality. And it will run through this and extract all of our source images. That's going to probably take a minute or two because it's about 3.5 minutes of source images. So I'll be back when it finishes extracting. All right, it has completed, and it has produced 6,192 frames of video, which may or may not sound like a lot, but it's a pretty nominal number. I think with that many, we can make a pretty good deepfake. But like my Patrick Stewart has like 24,000 in it. So, it just depends on how much, source footage you want to find and how much you want to screw around with it. But for our purposes, this should be cool. So once this completes, you can hit any key and close that window out. And we'll go look at our data source folder. So you can see it's got some black images at the front. I don't need to retain these. For source images, you can delete anything you're not going to use. For destination, we would have to keep all of this because it synchronizes with the audio of the final video product. But for the source, we can delete these because there's nothing in them. So they're gone. And we can kind of look and see, excuse me, a little something in my throat there. Just kind of scrolling through some images, watching Lori doing her chatting with her entourage, and kind of just scroll down through here. But basically, you would kind of look and see if any of it came out funny. Well, actually, from this, it's not going to come out funny. Sorry. When we do the facial extraction, you can get weird results, but this should all be fine. So just going down through, make sure I didn't fail to edit out anything. So like that's why I try to always edit out anybody else. Make sure it didn't pick up anything with anybody else's face in it, just to save time from screwing with it later. So that went from that right on into her next little public announcement. And then her interview. Another interview. Let's see, because she was kind of talking with her hands a lot in some of these. I think I edited that out because there was a part where like she was getting her hand up in front of her face. But I think I got all that out. That's what it looks like. Okay. I think we got good results here. Takes it a minute to load all this stuff. Okay, that's fine. So next I'll go ahead and extract the destination images using this extract images from video data DST flow. This should be really fast because that was it's like a 15, not even a 15-second video we're doing of Harris, but I bet this will be done in just a couple seconds, really. This again is my i9-11900K. My Threadripper does this. So this is an example of one of those, you know, having a faster, more cores on your CPU improves things versus higher clock speeds or, you know, IPC. So we've got our destination images for Harris. And that looks all right. And again, this is another good one where you can see like the hair is not occluding her face anywhere, which is a problem I often have, again, working with certain female models wherein, you know, bangs or long hair becomes an issue because it's covering parts of the face. Like when I did that video a while back where I did ABBA, one of the lead singers from ABBA, it was hard to find footage of her where her face was not obstructed with her hair, because she had really long blonde hair back in the day. So, okay, so we've successfully extracted our images, and this is the destination. So even though this has got images of the young boy, I can't delete those out because it will screw with the destination video has to be untouched in terms of like these frames. If you cut these out, you'll get like a point where it'll just be blank, and then it'll pick up here if I deleted all these out, but the audio would be out of sync and whatever. So you can't mess with your destination frames. You have to keep them. So next up, we'll work on facial alignments, extracting faces. So let's do that next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to manually extract faces, and then I'll back out of that and I'll just let it run through the automated process after I show you a couple of them. If I don't save or like complete this, it won't really spit anything out. So we'll show you the manual extraction process. It's not too complicated, but getting it to work right is kind of an issue. So we're doing whole face, so that's WF. We're not doing head, and we're not doing regular face. Regular face doesn't cover like the forehead area, and head includes getting the hair. Head is much more complicated, and regular face doesn't cover as much. So we're just going to stick with whole face today. That's all we're doing, and that's typically what most deepfakes you see on YouTube are using whole face, because regular face does not support the XSeg mask process, and a full head, like I say, is quite a bit more complicated. You have to have 100% source material with the same hairstyle, etc. Otherwise, you'll get, depending on the way the character looks, their hairstyle might suddenly change in the video, because you have to have all of the source material being identical for that. So we're going to go with whole face. It asks how many images I want to be able to extract, which I don't know why it bothers to ask me this in manual, because in manual you can only extract one at a time anyway. So, what resolution do we want to extract at? I'm going to probably do a 512 resolution model because I actually want to use Lori Lightfoot later on for some other purposes. So, if I want it to be decent, I want to do like a 512 resolution model of her. So, for the images we want to extract, if you extract anything above the resolution of the model that you're going to go with, it just downsizes it anyway. So like if we were going to do a 224 resolution model, there wouldn't be any point in extracting much higher than that unless I later wanted to make another model wherein it might be 512. So we'll just go ahead and use 512 of Lori Lightfoot. But we'll set the quality to 100. And I'm not going to bother with an align debug folder for my source images, but we'll do that for destination. So it's going to pull this up. And there'll be a little window here in a minute that's like a little application. I'm pretty sure I told it to do the manual, yeah. All right, this is our manual extraction window, which is super exciting. So you've got your little floating blue box here, and you can see all the little green gobbledygook going behind it there is what actually aligns and creates what they call like a landmark mask, basically. The landmarks are the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and it kind of tries to circle around the jawline as you see. It aligns itself, eyebrows, etc. Those are your landmarks. And you can see the red box has aligned itself in the orientation of the face with the arrow at the top pointing in the direction upward where it thinks the top of the face is. If it gets screwed up and it can't identify a face properly, sometimes that red arrow and box will be pointing in a totally different direction, and when it spits out the file, like her face will be sideways or something, and you won't be able to use that. But this is fine. So basically, you're looking for the face of the character that you want to manually align to. And here's another thing you can do. If you hit the A key, it says accuracy on and off. If you hit A, you can see now how much smoother it's moving. And you can see now I can sort of stretch it out and do things with it a little bit differently. So basically, if it's having a hard time doing it with accuracy off, and this actually does a pretty good job most of the time, but if you get facial obstructions and whatnot, sometimes it can't identify the face real well. But if you hit A and turn on accuracy, you can kind of force it to align it yourself. So those are the options, at least. But you can kind of expand it out. You can zoom in really close and see how close up it can get. So if a person's way in the background, you can zoom in, and sometimes it'll still pick them up, but it can be sort of challenging sometimes depending on the footage. And like I say, if the background was a similar color to her face, it might sort of think her face is the background, and then it might have a hard time delineating it. So just keep those things in mind. But you can either click left mouse button, and you see when it turns blue, that means it's locked this in for this one. But I can click it again and disable that. Another option, if it can't find anything at all, you can right click and kind of expand out just a manual box, and it will sort of kind of work, but usually I find that it doesn't really apply the landmarks, and so the final product usually is kind of a blurry mask. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong or if there's another step, but like I could tell it to do that. It would be cool if you could go in and like manually tell it where to put the eyes and so forth. There's another program called Machine Video Editor that I haven't fully learned how to use yet, but lets you do things like that after you go through and do all this. You can kind of align these things manually. That's helpful in certain kind of videos, but for this we don't need it. So we'll disable that, and we'll just say, okay, we're happy with that. To move to the next frame, you hit the period key on your keyboard, and it will move on to the next frame of video, and you can click and enable that, and so on and so forth. The other option is if it's aligned, you can just hit enter, and it's moving on to the next frame each time. If I hit the comma key, it will move back to the previous frames. I can go back through them and cycle through them and look at these different things. But let's just say that I was happy with all of, I got to the end of this and I was happy with it. Or I don't want to use the rest. If you don't want to use the rest, you can hit Q at any time, and it will just end this window, and it will zip through and just skip the rest of the options, and you will get the aligned images that you want in your aligned folder. So let's do that. That shouldn't take it too long, I don't think, because most of these we're not aligning anyway. And if I go into my align folder, you see just the ones we did ended up in there. Why is it asking me how to open a JPEG file? Ew, my name is Lori. So, anyways, I could probably kill that. Yeah, I will. So, assuming you had gone through all of them, this whole thing would have been full of over 6,000 images. It takes it a while to spit them out when it's actually producing them. Because I skipped most of the images, it did it really quickly. But suffice to say, we're going to delete these out, and I'm going to go back and show you guys the automated method of doing it instead, because it should be able to do that, being that these are all pretty straightforward and not complicated. So instead of doing the face set manual extraction, we're going to just do the regular one, which will do it through automation. But we're going to pick the same options we had before, whole face. Now in this case, the automated one can find all the faces in the video, which is why, as I said, I work it down so I just have Lori in there, because if it was Lori and it was some other guy with her or something, or somebody else was on stage, it will get them both. So I try to eliminate the extra people for source imagery because I just want it to pick up Lori. So again, max number of faces doesn't matter here because she's the only one in it. Still going with 512, changing to 100, and I don't need an align debug for my sources. Now this is going to pick up, and this will probably take a while because there's over 6,000 of them to go through. And we won't get the pop-up window here. It's not going to show us its alignment process. It's just going to do it. It's picking up here, but it will probably take it, I don't know, when it gets to up to full speed, maybe a half an hour or something to do that many images. And again, this is the CPU that, it says it's doing it on the GPU, but I know damn well that it uses the CPU a lot for this because my Threadripper does a better job of this. So we can go and look at the line folder though, kind of as they come out. And it's actually amazingly managing to find things that have literally nothing to do with Lori. See, it kind of thinks that's a face, and you can sort of see it. There's like maybe an eye, and a nose, and a mouth. So it's already finding stuff that I wouldn't have thought that it would find in there. So you delete out any of the ones that are not correct, not an aligned face of Lori. So I'm going to delete that, delete that, delete that, that. All right. See, it's like a reflection in her microphones, and that's what it's thinking is a face somehow. Amazing. And maybe it is somebody's face. Maybe it's reflecting hers or somebody else's face from the audience. I don't know. It's getting a lot of those. So when you get to the end of something like this, you see how these all have like the main frame. It finds 0_0, but it's also finding what it thinks is a second face in the same frame of video. If I search in my line folder for _1, it will just return all these kind of jacked up ones it's finding, and I can just go through and immediately delete all of those and go back. It's found more since then. So once it gets past this point where it's being confused by this microphone, it should stop doing this, like further into it. But this is obviously going to take it a while. It still says it's about 42 minutes is the estimation, so it's going to be running for a while to extract all those. I will be back when it finishes. All right, so we've got our files extracted. It says about 49 minutes to do everything, and that's largely because it was finding multiple images early on with that microphone problem we talked about, where like reflections and stuff are picking up more than one, what it perceives to be more than one person per frame. And so like you can see one of them here, it's got like Lori, microphone, _2 and an _3, like different reflections. Somehow it thought those were faces. So this is why doing it manually sometimes is really better. But with 6,000 some odd faces, that's a lot of work. So it'll take you a while, but this is faster really in this case. But sometimes manual at least will avoid you getting all these false positives. But we'll close that out. And then the best way I found to get rid of, see, even like down here, like how did it think? I don't know what it was doing, but it found more than one Lori in those just Lori footage frames. So most of them are all right, but there are some in there that are screwed up. So if I search for that _1, and you can see it's going to get all these bad results, which there are many, and I will just delete them. Now, some of these it's found are probably her, but because this is my source footage and not my destination, I'm just going to delete everything that isn't an _0. So it's taking those out, and I saw some _2s and _3s, so I'm going to go ahead and see. So even more microphone scumbaggery. Delete those. And there was an _3. Quite a bit more of the same malarkey. See if there's anything beyond that. _4. Outstanding. I think that's probably about it. Yeah, that's it. So we should have now, it says we've got 6,167 images out of the ones that we started with. So we've lost a few that were not what I would call viable or whatever because of weird alignment issues, or it found more than one of her in the same frame. And rather than confuse myself as to which one might be better or quote unquote correct, I just try to keep the _0s if possible. So we're just scrolling down, making sure we don't have any other bad examples of Lori. Looking pretty good thus far. All right, so we've gotten rid of all of our weirdly aligned stuff or false positives or things that were misaligned or whatever else, and we're down to a clean set of Governor Lightfoot, or Mayor Lightfoot, sorry. Next up, we will extract our destination images, which will be much faster because, as you recall, that was only like a 12.5-second video. So, let's see. It's further down. I always do this. Okay, data DST. So this one I'm going to just go ahead and do automatic. I showed you guys the manual extraction window. I'm not going to repeat that process in this case because, again, this is a fairly simplistic. She's looking at the camera. No obstructions or anything in front of the camera. This one should be pretty fast. So again, whole face, 512, 100 quality, and it begins the extraction, which this one I would think would take a very short period of time. There's only 363 images, and some of those are the kids, and not even VP Harris. So I'll give this I don't think it's going to take that long. It's probably going to take it 5 minutes, but I'll be back when it finishes that. All right, we've got our finished extraction here. It found, so it didn't get any extra images this time. It's just got 363 out of 363. Now, I know I said like with the regular DST images, we don't want to delete any of these, but for the aligned ones, we only want to keep the person that we want to work with. So in this case, this young lad here and his cohort must go. And this individual out the door until we're left just with a DST aligned folder full of Kamala Harris. And all those look good. They didn't align poorly. We didn't get, like I said, any false positive or anything weird like that. So the next thing we're going to do is start XSeg editing if we want these to come out well. So I'll go to that next. All right, if we're going to get into XSeg editing, then the first two options you have are these generic options, which do a pretty good job, honestly, and we could probably get away with using them for this video without even needing to do any manual XSegging, but I want to show you guys how to do it manually. So I'm going to start by, I guess I'll do this with the destination because that's short and it should apply quickly, and then I can just take it back off. But basically, what this does is it, I don't know if I explained, I guess I did explain kind of what XSegging does, which is it delineates for the software exactly what the face is, like the limits of the boundaries of the face. Generic XSeg will do that pretty much by itself and very quickly. So we'll go ahead and do this for the destination and we'll see how good of a job it does. So we run that batch file. Excuse me. Have a little Red Bull here. See how fast it's going through that. This is very quick when you do it generic, and it's done. Like, that's how fast it is. Now, to go see what it looks like, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the destination mask in the editor. And this is how we can see. Now, you can see I've got this editor here, but I can click on this to show what the generic one did. And you can see how it highlights around the face. It's really done a good job. I can kind of zoom through this and we can see if it's sort of screwed up anywhere. You can kind of see here, let me go back a little bit, like it's sort of bleeding into her neck a little bit there. So that's a little bit of an issue. It probably wouldn't affect the training, honestly. And actually it looks like it's even really figured out that these words are not meant to be part, like it's XSeg around the words pretty well. That's really kind of impressive. It's doing a pretty good job. I almost don't even need to manually do it. And like I said, I probably wouldn't. There's a little bit there of her neck. It's picking up again. I'd kind of like to see that corrected. Yeah, here, like it's getting more of the neck again. So we can see that, I mean, it did a good job, but there are a couple areas where it couldn't differentiate the face from the neck. And so I would still manually do this one just because this is pretty short and I can do this pretty quickly. But I'm going to exit out of that and I should be able to remove, if this works, to remove the generic data. All right, that should have removed it. I'm going to go back in now and make sure it actually did take it off of there. Yep, it's gone now, so I would have to go back and manually do it. So that's the destination one. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is just manually do the source one. So here's the source mask edit. This is a much larger list of images, of course. This had like 6,100 and some odd, like 53 or something, or 73. We don't have to do that many samples, though, to get a good result. Okay, so 6192 it said. So what are we doing here? What have we got? So here we've got the poly include and the poly exclude. So, and then they have different colors. I don't think that there's really any real reason to use some of this stuff, like view baked mask. And so like some of these let you view how it looks when it's been trained. I haven't trained it at all. Baked mask, I'm honestly not sure what that one does, so forgive me again. Like there's settings I've not screwed with, but in fact, it's seeming to be a bit of an issue here. I can't get it to stop this now. Oh, okay. So you can do different colors for whatever reason. I think it's to help, like if I wanted to do half the face, you know, in one color or something like that. This is a really bad masking. And then come, oh, sorry. And then I could do, maybe it makes it easier to see or something. I've never used the different colors. I always just use green. It's never been an issue. So anyways, some features again that I don't personally use that I don't think really have any major benefit. You can do a control Z to back, like if you make a mistake, so you're coming around here and you're like, oh, I clicked over there, I can hit control Z and it will delete that one I just did. So you can hold Z and it goes all the way back through until it closes out. And if you wanted to delete one, you can click on it and delete that, or you can just hit, of course, the D key or delete key on your keyboard. But what we're going to do is we're going to go around Lori's face here. Okay, so that's one, and that's maybe a little bit. There you go. And I'll skip ahead a bit. And she's kind of looking a different direction, so I'll do another one here. Very exciting, I know. This gets really, you know, repetitive after a while, of course, but one thing you'll learn is patience. Oh, that's a good number to stop on. Maybe we'll jump ahead a little bit. I mean, these aren't like amazing quality images or anything, but like I say, for the sake of today's lesson, it's not like we're trying to get the greatest quality out of it. Like if you could find, you know, footage of her that's all high def and 1080p or even, you know, 4K, but this particular person, Mrs. Lightfoot is, you know, not readily available in other formats. I got most of my Patrick Stewart footage from like Amazon Prime Video. You can watch, you know, TNG on there, and that's pretty good quality. And we'll do a couple more of these, and then I'll get to like the next section where the part after this where she's being interviewed, and you know, this is like some speech she gave. Like if you want to jump back to one you did before, you can hold control and hit left, and it goes back to the last one that I segmented. If I hit control right, it goes to the end because I haven't done the other ones. So you can jump around fast that way. Clicking the arrow once does 1 frame at a time. If you hold shift and hit the button, it goes by 5. So you can go through a little faster. If you extract images at 2048 resolution, which is what I used to do before I understood that it just downscales them to 512 or whatever your model is anyway, this goes much slower. It's like it's really choppy trying to load from image to image. As you can see with 512, it burns through it. So that's another advantage to just doing an extraction at a resolution that kind of makes sense. All right. So I'm going to do a bunch more of these. I'm going to hit, I'll be back in just a second when I kind of completed with Lori, and then we'll go do Harris. All right, moving on to Kamala Harris. She's got her kind of funky look on her face here. My name's Kamala Harris. So, kind of go around here. Try to just kind of follow the hairline and the edge of the face, pretty much. Bald people can be a little bit different, and then that's just sort of like make your best judgment call about where you want to kind of end the mask at, because it kind of moves into their forehead and all sort of looks the same, but people with hair are a little easier in that regard. Let's see. Now here it's kind of blurry. Sometimes with blurry ones, it's a little bit helpful to delineate for it. As we saw earlier when we did the generic XSeg mask, it was struggling a little bit on some of this because it was bleeding into her neck. All right, so here, example of the words being kind of across her face, right? Down here they're not a problem, but they come up here, they're on her face, and we don't want them to be part of her face. So I am going to tell it to ignore those. Now there's two different ways to do this. The way I'm going to do it is just to kind of trace around them here. But the other option is I could have just continued with the line of her face and then taken this and make a little area more or less lined out that says, this says don't train what is in here as part of this. So I'm going to take that back out because I don't really need it, but you can do either or. It's more useful to use this, like let's say there was an object where I didn't want to use her eye for some reason and I wanted it to be Lori, or I didn't want it to be Lori's eye, I wanted to retain Kamala's eye. I would cover it up like this. Like you can do things like that, like you know, the Batman stuff I'm screwing around with his mask. Like you can see Michael Keaton's eyes in the Batman mask. So if I, you know, say, okay, Michael Keaton's eye, I want to keep, or I want it to, actually that's kind of backwards. Sorry, this is more like, that'd be more like, in Keaton's case, it was like I masked the under portion of the face, and then I just said train the eyes, you know, something like this. So it would just use the eyes and ignore all the Batman face mask kind of stuff. So hopefully there's some sense made in that. You kind of just get good at some of this by playing around with it. Like I've done some stuff where like one person morphs into another, and that, like in the Matrix. I screwed around with some of the Matrix scenes. I never did end up posting any of those videos because I didn't, at the time, I don't think I was as good at this as I am now. And so, I probably could go back and enjoy screwing around with it. But there's a scene where like, Agent Smith is converting other people and other agents into more Agent Smiths, and like he puts his hand in them, that black stuff appears on him, and it kind of like when it sucks into them, like they become Smith. And so like I did a scene where I converted, like as they change, it morphs into a deepfake person instead of Smith. And so that takes a lot of XSegging around like that black crap on his face, and as it slowly changes, it becomes the other person. And that's sort of a challenge to just kind of see what works and what works good. And you might come back and have to delete all your XSegging or parts of it and start again and try to find something that you think looks better in the final product. So again, just kind of going around the text. I can kind of stretch this if I want, but I probably won't. And I mean, this is kind of dark and shadowed down here, so you just sort of have to guesstimate where you think your jawline fits in. You don't have to do every frame. Like when you're trying to deal with an obstruction like this with the words, I don't have to do every single frame in a row. I might do every 5 or so as it moves. And the software is smart enough to figure out that you don't want that in it. Now it's kind of moved off her face, so I'm going to go ahead and do it again. Okay. And it's kind of back on her face again. So this kind of back and forth sort of stuff gets a little repetitive, but again, if you want it to not be merged into her face and not look squirrely, then we have to take these measures. This is pretty straightforward. I'm screwing around with one right now with another Patrick Stewart one where like there's all kinds of stuff going off in front of his face the whole time, like explosions and debris and different things, and it's like you have to XSeg out all that stuff, and that that can take hundreds and hundreds of individual XSeg frames to get a good result. Now this is where that machine movie or video editor software I was talking about earlier that I haven't really learned how to use yet. It's a separate program from Deepface Lab, and today we're just doing Deepface Lab, but and again, I don't really know how to use it fully, so I can't give you guys a tutorial on something I don't fully know how to use, but I understand what it's for, and it will let you take, like if you had a frame of video that you couldn't get the face to extract from because there was too many obstacles or whatever on it, the machine video editor will let you copy an extracted mask from one frame where it did work and paste it onto one that it didn't, and then you can just manually align it to where you think it should be. And so that allows you to do a pretty good job. When there's a bunch of obstructions or something, you could still get a pretty good result. And I know like you can speed through it to some, oh, we're pretty much at the end here. I'll just do like one more. Like I say, there wasn't that many images of Harris. There's only like 200 some odd images. And we're almost done here with this, and then we'll start training the XSeg model, which won't take too long, I don't think. So I'm going to close out of that. Next up is XSeg train. That's going to ask us what we want to do again. We're going to use our GPU, of course, full face. And you can choose anywhere from 2 to 16 here. The higher amount of memory you have in your video card, the higher you can set this, but the higher you set it, the longer each iteration takes, but the more work it does in each iteration. I'll just set it to 8. That's a nice medium range. I don't understand why you need to pre-train an XSeg mask, so I've never done that. I don't see what the purpose of it would be. It seems like an extra step that isn't really necessary. But We'll talk about pre-training when we get to our SAEHD training portion, but pre-training and XSeg to me makes no sense. I guess somebody could explain it to me in the comments if anybody knows more about it. But I personally have never tried pre-training an XSeg mask. I don't understand what the value of that would be. And I've only got 33 segments total between Kamala and Lori. So this should do okay because there's not that much variation. Like Lori is pretty much looking in a range of motion, but she's not like doing anything crazy. So this is our XSeg training window, and there's a couple different options here. This is like the window that will show both people, and they're kind of like morphing and doing weird things. If I hit space, it will bring up the source character, and if I hit space again, it will bring up the destination character. So I can watch Lori, and as I hit P, it will progress. You can see how fast here it's training. So it's training one iteration every roughly 150 milliseconds. So that's about, let's just say 7 iterations a second. You can see it's already on like the 230s. I hit it again. And as I progress it, you can see it is quickly delineating what it will and will not train. So it's going to use what is not green. So the green has been XEgged out, and we've delineated the face that we want it to use in our source material. And you can see it's not great yet. There's still parts where like the green in the face, like her eye here is screwed up. And I typically let this go between 10 and 20,000 iterations, which at this speed doesn't take that long, like a half an hour or something. Harris is already doing okay. Again, some sections where it's like, it's already kind of getting there for her. But she didn't have that many images to work with. The less you have, the quicker it does it. I love these morphed images. This looks so corny. It looks hilarious. So, anyways, I'm gonna let this train. Like I said, I'll come back here when it's at around 10,000. Even sometimes around 5,000 might be okay, depending on how complicated your XSegging was. But this is a very straightforward, little obstruction to no obstruction, nothing really crazy going on. We didn't really do any side profiles either, so there's not much for it to learn here. So I will be back when this is finished, or when this is where I think it's going to be, doing a good enough job after, when it hits about 10,000 iterations. So that'll probably be about, 20, 30 minutes. So I'll be back. So honestly, even though this is at only about 7,600 right now, I think we're getting to the point where it's not going to benefit that much more from more training. You can kind of see as we go through it, but it's pretty well got Lori figured out. And you can see here where I XEgged around the don't be mean stuff. Sorry, that's my Discord making noises. Excuse me. But yeah, going around here, it's doing a pretty good job of XEgging where I told it and ignoring the words. Again, I'm just hitting P on the keyboard. So you got some different hotkeys up here. You can hit S to save it at any time. You can see it saved real quick and kept going. You can hit space to again go between like this morphing page, Lori and Harris, or source and destination as it were. Something else I was going to talk about is the history bar. So up here I can kind of change how that looks by hitting the L key. But basically, this right here, as at the top, or when I first started, it was up here at the top and pretty wide variance. And as you can see, as we've trained it, it's progressively lowered down this graph. It's still got some spikes, but in general, it continues. And even here now, it's continuing to tighten up. As it tightens up and moves down, like that's an indicator that it's getting better and that it's getting to the point where it's going to be able to learn less and less. And I could let it keep going until that bar was basically a solid bar. I don't know if it ever actually gets like to a solid bar in this one here. Usually around here is where I see it finally get, and it looks good enough at that point. But I mean, a lot of this is just kind of eyeballing it and saying, okay, yeah, that looks good enough. You know, you could let it go as long as you want, and you know, eventually you'd probably hit a point where it wasn't going to improve anymore, or like there's such micro improvements that you can't tell by looking at it anymore. And I think we're kind of at that point now where even though there's still the occasional little spike here, like there at kind of a spike for some reason, but just in general, I think it's got the characters learned sufficiently. So at the point where you get to where you're happy with it, you hit the enter key and it's going to save and close that out for us. And we'll hit enter again to get out of that. Now we have to apply our training. So we've got data destination train mask apply and data source train apply. You can do both of these at the same time as long as you have reasonably good hardware. And this will take a minute to do the source because that's over 6,000 images, but the destination one will be very quick. So that's only 253, and that's going to burn right through that. So I'll just go ahead and let that do that, and then I'll switch to doing source because this is going to be so fast. That's done. And then I want to apply my source mask training. Now, see, this is going to take longer because, like I say, this is over 6,000. Actually, that's going pretty quick. I think that has something to do with the fact that we're only using 512 res images as opposed to, like I say, I used to be kind of an idiot and do the 2048 before I understood how, like I say, it auto downsizes those images, you know, in the merger process. In fact, we can just let this run. It's not taking too long. Look how quick that's going. But it auto downsizes them to whatever the resolution of your model is. I didn't even learn about that till like a month ago. Once again, always learning new things. You know, I've been doing this for over a year, but most of this stuff I've just kind of learned on my own and probably made some incorrect assumptions about how things worked because I didn't have anybody to bounce the ideas off of, but got into a Discord server about it here, again, about a month and a half ago, and have learned some things since then and refined the process and the way that I do this, and I think it's improved my results a bit. So give it a second here, and I'll come right back when this is done. All right, that has completed its application of the source XSeg training. So we can go look at it and see how it came out real quick, just so, sorry, wrong folder. So I'll just look at the destination one, a Kamala, because that'll load a lot faster. And we can kind of go through and see if, like last time, we had that problem where it was sort of bleeding into our neck a little bit. Now let me go back and look at this. So you can kind of watch as it moves. The highlighted area is the only area it's going to train, and this part will still be visible. So you can see we didn't do every frame there, and yet it's moving with it as we wanted it to do. And it comes off her face, and then her face is fully trained, and then it comes back on, and it's kind of intelligently moving our mask with it. Just watching it, make sure there's no, yeah, see, that came out pretty good. It's well defined. We don't have that bleeding part into the neck there or anything like that. It looks pretty clean. I'm not going to bother doing Lori because Lori's much longer. It'd take forever to go through it and whatnot. This is the general idea, though. You get how it's supposed to look. So we got those done. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make, as we talked about earlier, a faceset.pack file, because this will improve the load times when we want to start training our SAE-HD merger. So the faceset.pack, we want to do source, not destination. The destination on this is so small, it's not worth even bothering to pack it up because it's only like not even 300 images. So faceset source, so data source utility faceset pack or unpack or resize. We don't need to resize it. All our images are already the same size. We want to pack it. So I'll tell it to pack, and it just starts doing it. As you can see, it's very fast. Only take about 8 or 9 seconds. And what this is going to do is, like I said, make kind of like a packed up archive file called the PAK file. And that will contain, so I can tell it, yes, go ahead and delete the original files, because I can, when I unpack it later, if I want to, they'll all come back. So I'll say yes, delete. And that, now when I go into my source aligned, instead of a bunch of images, I just have a faceset.pack file. And you can see it is only about 800 megabytes instead of like, so it's smaller than the images were individually. And if I needed to copy this to a different drive or something, this would copy very quickly as opposed to it trying to copy a bunch of individual image files. Now this is my source stuff. I don't need any of this source stuff here anymore because I've already extracted the images from all of it. So I'm going to go through here and just delete out these source video frames. These are not the aligned faces. These are the video frames from the source images, and I don't need those anymore. With destination, like I said, you don't want to delete these, but with source you can to free up drive space. And as you can see, it's a substantial amount of drive space we're cleaning up here. That's about 23, 24 gigabytes worth of stuff. So we'll go ahead and delete those. And magically now we've got a little bit more drive space. You can see I use up a lot of drive space doing this stuff. I'm always trying to keep it, oh yeah, still going through it. So there's a lot of images that we took out by doing that. So we've made good progress. We've gone through all the initial stages. The next thing to do is to create and train an SAEHD deepfake model. So we don't have any yet in here, so it's going to tell me I don't have one. Enter a name for the model. So we'll call this Lori 512 because this Lori Lightfoot is our source and 512 is the resolution I plan to use. With an RTX 3090, you can train 512 resolution models pretty readily. You know, maybe 448 might be a little bit faster and more, allow you to do a little bit more. But I plan to use this again in the future for other things, so I want it to be pretty good resolution. I'm going to go ahead and do 512. So I'll call it Lori 512. And it says this is a model first run. So what we're going to do, I don't normally pre-train models because I don't know, like it's supposed to have value and I know what it's supposed to do, but I haven't found that it's really made a significant difference. But I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway because we're doing best practice today. So it says again, pick our GPU. So we want, of course, usual stuff. Auto backup. Yes. I guess I said no, whatever. Write preview history. It basically, oh yeah, okay. So it's going to auto back it up every quarter, like roughly every quarter hour. So it'll just save itself as you do it. So even if you have like a power outage or something, you won't lose much training time. I don't think I need my preview history. Target iteration. If you leave it at 0, it will just go indefinitely. So we're going to leave it at 0. Now, flip source face randomly. Here's what it says. Random horizontal flip source face set covers more angles, but the face may look less natural is what he means to say. Anyways, what this does is, so you guys kind of saw the images I had, and a lot of them she's sort of looking to our right in the image because she's being interviewed, and so she's sort of looking in a certain direction to address the person that was speaking to her. Well, if I want it to show her looking in the other direction, but I don't actually have an image of that, what this will let you do is it almost effectively doubles the number of images that you have. It doesn't actually increase the number, but it will flip them back and forth and use it in both directions and allows it to cover whichever direction she's looking. Now, when they say it may look less natural, it's because people's faces aren't necessarily symmetrical. And for example, she might have a blemish on one side of her face that suddenly appears to be appearing on the other side of her face. However, I usually do this, and then I turn off the destination one. You can't do both at the same time, but just... excuse me. It says random horizontal flip destination face set makes generalization of the source to destination better if source is not enabled. So I think that helps it generalize facial expressions better a little bit. But again, we would like to use the source flip. At least that's what I like to do. And we're doing what I like to do today. You can play with settings at your leisure. But yeah, like I say, I like to have the ability to have it ostensibly give me twice the images by flipping horizontally. So I'm going to say no to destination. Batch size, I will start with 4 because at 512, depending on what settings you're using, 4 is kind of about where I can be at. Some, I can be like 6 or 8, honestly, for some of this early stuff, but it will train at slower pace. But again, batch size, I think I meant to talk about that earlier. So batch size, to my understanding, the higher the batch size, the more faces it compares per iteration of training. So a batch of 4, I think it compares 4 images at a time. And I may be wrong about exactly how that works, but roughly batch size equals faces being trained per iteration. So the more faces it can compare for every iteration that it runs, it reaches, the goal in a lower number of iteration count, and it does a better job of like learning facial expressions and whatnot. But I've trained models at batch 1 and 2 and had them come out fine. So your call, but 4 seems to be a good compromise area. It does seem like once in a while, if you train at a low enough batch size, like one example, it's like it only trains one face of the source against one face of the destination. And sometimes, for lack of a better word, it picks the wrong face from the source. And so you'll end up with like a screwed up facial expression on your destination, and it's like it won't figure that out or fix itself unless you increase the batch size. So having at least a 2 to 4 probably for the best. 1 can work, but again, if it learns it wrong, it won't unlearn its mistake unless you give it a bigger batch size. So we'll go with 4. We're going to do 512 resolution. This is entirely one of these how much VRAM do you have scenarios. So I have 24 gigabytes. I can run a 512. I've got experience with running them anywhere from 128 all the way up to 640. 640 you can even do on an RTX 3090 now, but again, you're talking like batch 2 at maximum on the max settings, and it gets pretty slow waiting for that to go through. So we'll do 512. If you have, I want to say, if you wanted to do up to the 224 area, maybe a little higher than that, you could use like an 8 gig card. A little higher than that, you probably want something with more like 11, like a 2080 Ti. You can do like 320 res. You could do a little higher than that, maybe even at low batch. And then, again, the RTX 3060 has 12 gigs, so even though it doesn't have a lot of CUDA cores and it won't be very fast, you could at least have a decent batch size if you're willing to wait for a while. And they don't use much power, so that's nice. So there's, that range. And then, even though AMD is slower because they have 16 gigs of RAM, that's something you guys should watch out for, is when the 3070 Ti 16 gig version comes out here in January. Those are going to be good cards for this because they're kind of a mid-range on the price. I mean, everything is expensive right now, but they're not maybe as crazy as like a 3090, but they'll still have a good amount of memory and a good amount of cores. And, probably will be a sweet spot for people looking into getting into deep faking. 3070 Ti 16 gig edition, whenever that comes out in January-ish. These launches have been gone. So those you'll probably be able to do like a 448 resolution. I'll pull up the help tip on this one. So more resolution requires more VRAM and more time to train. Values adjusted to multiples of 16 and 32 for a certain architecture. So we're going to do 512 as I said. We want to do whole face. This gives us head. Well, actually, I don't know what H is. Middle of the face. Well, I guess we can do a question mark on that and see what it says. Half. Okay. I don't know what that would do exactly. Mid face, full face, whole face, head. Half face is better resolution but covers less area of the cheeks. Mid face is required 30% wider than half face. So, there's some description of what each of these things is going to cover, but whole face and head are the only ones that require that work with XSeg masking, to my understanding, and we XSegged our stuff, so we're going to do whole face. Now, this one is kind of a new thing, he added a new option to it, but we'll read this. It says, it doesn't even mention in the description, but there's also a -T we're going to add. And so, let's see, DF preserves moral identity preserved face. I don't even know what that means. LIAE can fix overlay differences in face shapes. U increases the likeness of the face. So that means it keeps it looking more like your source character. Because otherwise, you sometimes get kind of an amalgamation appearance where it doesn't quite look like Laurie and it doesn't quite look like Harris. Some of these help it keep the original character's appearance more, which we want. So this increases likeness of the face. D says doubles the resolution, uses the same computational cost. So it's like applying a super resolution without costing you any more video memory, etc. And then there's also a dash T, which he doesn't appear to have a descriptor in here, like a tooltip for. But dash T is again supposed to help it retain the likeness of the source character even more. So we're going to do LIAE UDT. And it accepted that, even though there's no tooltip about it, because apparently this just hasn't been updated. But that's something he added in like the last couple of revision updates to Deepface Lab. Okay, so next up, autoencoder dimensions. All face information will be packed into AE DIMs if amount of AE DIMs are not enough. For example, closed eyes will not be recognized. More DIMs are better, but requires more VRAM. You can fine tune this to fit your GPU. So in this case, what he's talking about is if you don't allocate enough VRAM for dimensions, like it says, like sometimes it doesn't recognize that the eyes are supposed to be closed. I think like certain facial expressions are learned better again by increasing this. Teeth, that kind of stuff get better definement if you increase this number. But of course, as it says, it does increase the VRAM cost. I'm going to set it to 300. That's what I used for Christian Bale, and that worked pretty well. Auto encoder dim, regular encoder dims helps recognize more facial features and achieve a sharper result, but requires more VRAM. I think I did like 80 on this last time, so not a huge change. Decoder dims recognize facial features and achieve that. So again, same difference. I'm not 100. There's technical things behind this that I don't fully understand, but I know that higher is better usually on these. Decoder mask dimensions. Typical mask dimensions equals the dimensions of your resolution divided by 3, I guess. If you manually cut out obstacles from the destination, you can increase this to achieve better quality, which I did do. Now ours was 512. So if we say 512 and it says divided by 3, I would think that'd be much higher than that. That should be 170 according to that. So I don't know why mask dimensions equals decoder dimensions. Oh, decoder dimensions divided by 3. My mistake. So this says 80 divided by 3 would be like 27. So let's just do like 30 on that. Mask training, yes. I believe this is required for XSeg. Option is available only for whole face or head. Mask training clips area to full face or XSeg mask, thus network will train. So basically, you want to enable this if you're doing XSeg because it helps it properly train the face inside the masked area that we delineated with XSeg. So we want to use that. Eyes and mouth priority, yes. We want it to, otherwise it basically says that the eyes can turn out looking kind of like fish eyes or looking in the wrong directions. So we definitely want to prioritize eyes and mouth. Okay, this is another one that's optional here. Uniform distribution of yaw distribution of samples. This is like for side profile stuff. We didn't really do any side profile, so I don't need to turn this on. And you can turn it back off or on later to help if you add more images in that you need, like side profile images, if you need it to do a good job. Helps fix blurry side faces due to small amount of them in the face set. So if you don't have a lot of side profile images and you need them, this will kind of help them look better. But I'm not going to bother to turn it on because we're not really doing any side profiles of Lori or Kamala in this case, but I could. Blur out mask is another optional feature that you would add later on, but it blurs out the edge of the applied mask. So basically, when we get into merging our mask later, this will make more sense, but you're trying to blur the edges of your trained source character onto the destination face to look as seamless as possible. And so this makes it blur the edges of the mask better, and it looks more natural and kind of, again, blurs it into your destination character's face better. We don't need it now, but we can do it later. Place models and optimizer on the GPU. So basically, you can free up video memory by choosing certain settings on your CPU instead, but they're way slower. So you can do that if you want, but like if you're limited on your VRAM amount, you can tell it to go ahead and say, all right, well, I've only got what I've got, so, run this on the CPU instead. And it will run, but not well. So we're going to say yes, we want it on the GPU. Aid of belief optimizer, yet another wonderfully named thing. Requires more VRAM, but the accuracy and the generalization of the model is higher. So again, it helps with facial expressions and just generalizing those different facial twitches and stuff, makes it act more naturally. So again, we want that. That is optional though, and if you have a VRAM limitation, you can leave it off and still do an okay result. It's not even that. I think you only added this in like 6 months ago or something. So before that, that didn't exist, and people have been making deepfakes way longer than 6 months ago. But it is something to leave on if you can. All right, learning rate dropout, we don't want now. We'll add that later. This is not one of the default settings, but it is a required one to use before we hit the end. What it does is it starts, well, it'll say, but when the face is trained enough, you can enable this option to get extra sharpness and reduce sub-pixel shake for less amount of iterations. Enable it before you disable random warp and before you turn on GAN. So random warp is something that's going to come up here in a second. It'll ask us about, but right now we don't want to use this. This isn't a default setting. What we're going to do is we're going to train using random warp for like the first however many couple 100,000 of iterations we want to let it go for. And when it gets to the point where I think it looks good enough and the training history says that it's learned what it's going to learn, then you enable learning rate drop off. Learning rate drop off will sharpen it up as it says, but when you turn that on, it's like the model will no longer be able to learn new situations very well, like lighting conditions and so forth. Like it'll stop learning those as well, and it will just start to sharpen up what you do have. So leaving that off until you need it is a good idea. So we're going to start with that off. Random warp we're going to leave on. That's like a default setting that we have to have. It is required to generalize facial expressions of both faces. When the face is trained enough, you disable that to get extra sharpness and reduce sub-pixel shake. I think sub-pixel shake, you'd have to see it in action, but like sometimes it looks like there's pixels moving around a little bit beneath the mask. And I think that's what they're referring to. We're going to leave that on. That is a default setting that you don't turn on until you're ready to enable GAN pretty much. So we'll get to GAN in a second. That's on. Random hue, saturation, light intensity, also known as HSV for some reason, even though there's no V in there. So random hue, saturation, light intensity applied to the source face, set only at the input of the neural network, stabilizes color perturbations during the face swapping, reduces the quality of the color transfer mode, but by selecting close to one of the source face set, thus the source face set may be, okay, so in this case, I'm honestly not even going to bother with this. It's not really necessary, but this, putting all this jargon to the side, it helps it learn different lighting scenarios better. So like if you have a lot of lighting conditions that are going to be changing in your destination video, you need source images that also are from those lighting scenarios. So like if the destination video has dark sections where it's hard to see your the character, you also need source images where your source person was in a dark room or something. We're doing pretty well lit characters. Both Lori in this as well as Kamala are in well lit rooms. It doesn't change, so we don't really need this for that, but that would be what that would be for. I've seen some videos here recently. Jarkin is a channel you guys may be familiar with. He did a Leonardo DiCaprio as Tom Holland in Spider-Man, and there's a scene like where he's meeting Mysterio down in the sewer, and there's all this different lighting conditions, and it was perfectly done on Leo's face. It looked like there was like fire off in the distance kind of reflecting off him correctly, and the water ripples and stuff, lighting was reflecting correctly off the character's face. This setting helps with that, but we're not going to need that for our current deepfake, but that's what that's for. I'm going to leave it off. GAN is a setting you enable at the end pretty much. Now, this stands for Generalized Adversarial Network, I believe. And what it says is it forces the neural network to learn small details of the face, enable it only when the face is trained enough for learning rate dropout on and random warp off, and don't disable it. The higher the value, the higher the chance of artifacts. Typical find value is 0.1. So basically you train random warp first, up to the point where you're happy with how that's going, and you think it's as sharp as it's going to get. Then you enable learning rate drop off and let that train with random warp enabled for a while until you think that's as good as it's going to get. Then you disable random warp, again let it train for a little while longer, and finally you enable GAN, and that will finish sharpening it out for you. And that takes quite a while for GAN to run through that. You'll start getting what looks like little grid lines across the character's face for a while in the training window. But eventually, like, it's like an ever tightening grid of little squares and weird squiggles that eventually goes away, and the character is much, much, much sharpened as a result of it. And that's how you got to do it at the end to get your best sharpening results. And that uses quite a bit of VRAM again, and it makes every iteration of training take longer. So that's why we don't do it till the end. Face style power, we're not going to screw with that either, but it says learns the color of the predicted face to be the same as the destination inside. It basically helps, like, again, kind of with lighting conditions. It makes, if the source character and the destination character have pretty disparate face colors, like, skin tones, it will kind of help merge them together a bit, but it does increase the chance of a collapsing model. If your model collapses, like, you either have to have a backup where you can roll back to, or it's dead and you have to start all over again. So a collapsed model is not desirable. I've had it happen to me once or twice where it's like you can see in the training window the person's face kind of starts turning purple around the edges and starts getting weird ripples in it, and it gets rather horrific. So but we definitely don't need it at the beginning, and I don't think we really need it at all. I haven't used it in quite a while, and it's, again, another VRAM hog, so leave that off. Background style power is not a bad one to use. It kind of learns the area around the target face, and it seems like it helps the two masks line up better. Not required. It says typical value is 2. I've been running at 1.0 along with Deepface 10 from Discord, one of the gentlemen that's been helping out with this stuff. That's what his suggestion was. I do think it helps a little bit, but we don't need it for now. We can turn it on later. Color transfer. Okay, so this, like if the color of the character that you're putting onto the destination, like if the faces don't blend well and have significantly different color tones, you can enable one of these, RCT, LCT, MKL, IDT, and SOT. And I usually use RCT or MKL. I don't want to be able to tell you what they do specifically from a technical standpoint, but you can try each one and see which one makes yours look the best. But you can actually do this when you're merging it and not as part of this training environment. So we don't need it right now. We can do it when we merge it if we want. So I'm going to leave those off. Gradient clipping. Gradient clipping reduces the chance of model collapse, sacrificing training speed for stability. We don't need it now, but when I go to enable GAN is when I turn that on, because GAN has an increased chance of causing model collapse, and so when I actually need to defend against collapsing models is when I turn that on. Pre-training mode. So this is I think I was talking about this earlier. I don't know if I mentioned or not. Pre-train the model with a large amount of various faces. After that, the model can be used to train the fakes more quickly. Forces random warp to no, random flips to yes, GAN power to 0, learning right. Okay, so apparently it's going to change some settings of its own volition. Why would it turn off random warp? How could it learn anything if it has random warp off? That's interesting. But, well, whatever. So basically what it does is it's going to train Lori against this large, varied pool of target people, basically. Like they're all celebrity faces and so forth, with different lighting conditions and different facial expressions and looking around in different directions and whatnot. And it helps, as it stated, supposedly, like when you go to train the actual model after this, like it'll train it faster and do a better job and have better, understanding of facial expressions and stuff. My experience is it doesn't really seem to do that, or it doesn't really make much of a difference. I'm going to do it again because of best practice, so we'll go ahead and enable that. And you guys can see what it does. Now, this should bring up, so look, it says loaded faces packed from, oh yeah, okay, so that's the pre-trained faces that it's loading up, yeah. Doesn't look like it actually loaded up my model, like my face set. I didn't mention it. Let's see what this looks like here in a second. Maybe it actually doesn't use your model. Maybe it just shows. I haven't done this in a while. Okay, yeah, so it really just does pre-train, like just random characters. It doesn't even use your character. So this is the training window. This is sort of looking a little strange. I mean, it's starting to do something there. But basically, this is a long, windy road that we're about to embark upon here, boys and girls. So that's being a little weird. This should be showing more than it's doing. I've had this problem before sometimes where it doesn't like to do much. It's almost like a bug or something. You have to reload it. It's starting to do something. It's just going so dang like it's. That's because I have it at batch 4. So you see, it's only getting about one iteration every 740 milliseconds, give or take. You can kind of see like eye, and kind of frowny face mouth here a little bit. Like it's really early and it doesn't know much yet, but I'll let it go for a little while like this. If I have a problem with it, I may have to restart it. But basically, this is where I'm going to drop off the video for a couple days, probably, and pick up and see where it's at after it's been training for a while and see what results we're getting. And once this gets to, even if, even a couple 100,000 iterations or something, we'll go on to training our actual model of Lori versus Harris. So that said, I'm going to kind of sign off for the night, but it'll be an instantaneous pickup for you guys when I pick up recording again. So see you guys in a couple days. I thought I'd jump in real quick and show you guys. So this is around, just shy of 22,000 iterations. It's been training for about 2 hours. And so we're doing about 10,000 iterations an hour. I dropped it to batch 2 because when I first started it, it was looking like it wasn't really picking up. Sometimes it'll bug out when I first start it, and you'll just get like a black, or not black, but like a red square here, and it never develops. You have to start it over again. I don't know what's up with that, but anyways, you can see it's working. This is just a little, a quick intro here. But this is the pre-training, so it doesn't have a source character. You can see that we've got like this little girl here, and then all of a sudden it's some military dude, and then it's this guy here, and you can kind of see like there's Justin Trudeau, and you can kind of see here like, all right, let me go back. So this is the source to source comparison. So this is like saying, if this was our source character, this is how well it's learned our source character, right? Then hit space. Now we have our destination character and how well it's learned our destination character. So this is Justin Trudeau, and this is how well it knows Justin Trudeau's face. And then I hit space again, and this is its predicted outcome of what our source character would look like overlaid onto Trudeau, right? And then we have the masked version, which you can see this has been XSegged, although I don't, like maybe they didn't do so great around the hair. They probably generic XSegged this. This is, all pre-trained stuff, so I don't know what processes they used. I can't pull these up and see how the files look. But anyways, again, source and destination and masked predicted outcome, basically. So obviously this is very early at 22,000 iterations is, really insubstantial. Like most of the ones that I do, when I'm done, have at least 1 million iterations, and this is still pre-training, so we're not even into actually training the model yet. But by the time we're all said and done, to get a fairly good result, we'll probably need like anywhere from 800,000 to like 1.2 million iterations, which will take about a week with an RTX 3090 at this resolution, plus or minus a day or so. Just like if it looks good enough at a certain point, I might just say screw it and we'll call it good. But if we want to get a really excellent result out of it, we might have to let it go for a while. So like I said, I just wanted to jump back in real quick and show you kind of, guys, how it starts and like what these different things mean. You can see the history bars all over the place like we talked about. The yellow bar is the destination character and how well it's learned them, and the blue is the source. But since this is not, again, a real model and this is just pre-training, I don't know if it'll ever really totally straighten up or tighten up. But as you train it further, I've seen people who have like trained the living piss out of a pre-train to like 1 million iterations on a pre-train, and it does start to look pretty good. So anyways, that's where we're at. I'll go ahead and continue to pick up tomorrow and see what it looks like. In the morning it should be 100 some odd thousand, and we can kind of look at that and see how it's doing. So I'll be back then. All right, I've let it go. I didn't actually train it all last night because I switched over and I'm still working on one of my Christian Bale videos, and I'm down to one PC because I had to send my GPU back to AMD, so I've just got the one system right now, and I can't do two at once, and it's driving me nuts not being able to do more than one at a time and wanting to do like 3 or 4 at any given time. So I set it to batch 1 after we ran it at 4 and then 2 for a while. And you can kind of see how the history bar gets kind of a little bit crazy when you do that. But I mean, I can cycle through it, and it's learned something from it. And like I said before we even started doing this, like pre-training, in my view, is not really even technically necessary. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything, and it probably helps a little bit. But I've done like several of the last ones I did not pre-train, and they came out fine. So I'm thinking I'm going to call it good at the 100K mark and go ahead and switch on to start training the actual model. So hit enter here to save and quit. You can see it's saving. A little over 100,000. I think that's fine. I mean, I've done some as high as like 500,000. And then, like I say, I really can't tell the difference when I do the final result, whether I pre-train or not. So next up, we're going to go ahead and tell it to train SAEHD again, but we're going to tell it not to pre-train. So picking our GPU, and you have to enter pretty quick there to change the settings. So we're going to go back down. I think it should still be as I set it. I'll set it back to 4 because I'm going to be doing, the actual model now. Mass training, yes. IMouth, yes. We're not doing any side profiles really, so we don't need that. No blur out mask until later. Sorry, I had a dinging from Facebook. Model on the GPU, yes. Aid of belief, yes. No learning rate drop off until later. Or drop out, excuse me. Random warp, yes. That's getting annoying. I'm not going to screw with this because the lighting conditions are similar between the two videos. I think we talked about that. No GAN yet, no face style yet, no background style yet, no color transfer yet, and we probably don't need that from in here anyway. And I'll turn gradient clipping on later when I start using GAN, but for now I don't need it, so I'll leave that off and switch pre-training to no. And you see how fast it loaded that 6167 packed faces from my line folder because they're in that pack file that we made, that faceset.pack file. So it loaded very, very fast. Normally, I mean, like 6,000 images wouldn't take it that long, but if you've got like 20, 25,000 images in there, that can really make it load much quicker. Well, that's sort of interesting. Well, this is what I was talking about, where I've had this problem in the past where it does like weird red squares. I may just have... Wow, that's nice. Yeah, it's bugged out on this one. I may have to restart it a couple times, and I may end up just having to make a whole new model and just say screw the pre-training. We might have wasted a day on that. This is some kind of a bug with the Deepface Lab software. So I'll be right back. I'll see if I can get it to start successfully without doing this weirdness right here. So 1 second. All right, I just restarted it. I didn't make a new model or anything, and this time I think it's picked up correctly. I've had that happen before where it's like, I don't understand what causes it, but you get like we saw where it's just a bunch of red stuff, and you can tell it's not going to work when it does that. There's no point in even continuing. You just got to close it and start over again. But you can see here, I mean, it's very early with 100 some odd iterations, but you can see kind of the eyes and the mouth starting to take very, very minimal shape. This one I don't think will actually take a super long time to do because we don't have a very large destination video, and so it doesn't have much to learn there. There was only like 250 some odd images of Harris that it has to learn, and so it should learn her pretty quickly. And Lori, is around 6,000, like about 6197 images, I think. And so really, again, it shouldn't take a super long time for it to learn that either. It's when you start doing face sets of like 16, 20,000 or something, that it can take it quite a long time to really pick up your source character. And I didn't go back through this and do much, didn't do any real curating of the images. What I'll do sometimes, what I usually do, I guess, if I'm really trying to do a good job, and I should have gone over it, but like go through every image which is really time consuming. That's kind of why I didn't do it. But and delete anything that's too blurry, like where she turned her head too fast, whatever. I think we talked about it earlier, where I don't really think that any of these were too problematic in that regard, because she's just sitting there having an interview or she's giving a speech or whatever, but she's really not moving her head around too much, that kind of stuff. So I think that they're fine. But what I normally do, like if I've got source footage from a bunch of different parts in a movie or something, and there's motion blur when you're capturing that source imagery, in order to make sure that it doesn't have an issue, I'll go back. Like this one here isn't great. I mean, you can see like the teeth just kind of look like a white line, so not amazing. Here there's more definition in it, although still not super sharp. But like these are better, of course. Not so great again, but you get the idea. Like I say, these probably are better. I almost could have probably just got rid of that opening speech stuff and only had maybe 3,000 images, and it probably would have been sufficient for this, but we were just trying to go over the process. So that said, I'll let this run now for a while, and we'll see where this gets after a couple 100,000 iterations. This one we definitely can't stop at 100,000 and just progress. This will need, at default settings, probably a minimum of 300,000-400,000, and then maybe we can start changing some settings. But that said, this is where we're at for now. I'll be back when I can continue to show you guys progress. So I'm coming back in here around the 25,000 iteration mark, and you can see actually it's doing a pretty good job of picking up detail from Lightfoot. And you can also see actually Harris, because there's so few images in that destination character set, again only about 259 or something, 279, a very small destination face set, it has already learned that really quite well. I mean, it'll get better than this even at default settings, but like that's already getting to the point where you can make out everything just fine, and then you can see what it kind of looks like with Lori overwritten onto Harris. And of course, this is all very early, and it's going to be a lot better than that even before we go on to the next settings. And here you can see the XSeg mask that we applied is starting to apply properly with the two merged together. So again, when the text is down here, it won't be part of Lori's face. This looks pretty corny. But just jumped back in real quick to show you guys the progress. This has only been running for a little over about 2.5 hours, and we've made this kind of progress. I said it at 2 again. It just seems like after a little bit of initial at 4, you can switch to 2 and get more speed, and I think at that point it doesn't really screw up too bad, like any chance of learning the wrong facial expressions or something, especially with such a small face set. It learned them fairly quickly what it needed to do, and now I'm just telling it go faster and get sharper quicker. So anyways, that's where we're at. We'll be back again when it gets further along. So I'm back around 40,000 to show you guys it's doing something kind of weird here. We probably don't have enough representation of source material with her face kind of looking up at this funny angle like this, and so it's doing some pretty weird stuff just with like a couple frames of video. You can see normally it's actually looking pretty good already. I don't know if it'll cycle back around to another one that looks like crap, but a couple of them looked really bad like that, like really bad. And so I'm going to try to do to see if it corrects it is enable that yaw setting we had earlier. So I'm going to save. Like honestly, a lot of it looks really good already for not even being at 40,000 iterations. I'm really kind of surprised at how good it looks. But this is from another folder, sorry. So I'm going to try enabling that yaw setting, because I think it's looking at that as kind of a side profile, and because I don't have enough in the face set, it's blurry. So we're going to see if it'll fix it. If it doesn't, I may have to get more source material of Lightfoot and see if we can kind of correct the problem. So this is good. This is showing, this is troubleshooting. So let's see, where is it? All right, so this is the one I was talking about. Uniform yaw distribution of samples. Helps to fix blurry sides of the face due to small amount of the face set. So I'm gonna turn that on. That really has very minimal VRAM cost, if any. But again, you know, if you don't need it, I don't usually turn it on. But I'm gonna run that, and we're gonna see if it makes a difference here. But it'll be a while before we can tell if it's really solved anything. So I just kind of wanted to go over that with you guys real quick. If you notice stuff like that, there's got to be a reason for it. So either we don't have enough source images where Lori is looking at that kind of semi-extreme angle, or like I say, we need to enable that yaw setting, or a combination of both, really. So we'll come back to this here in a little bit and see if it's corrected that problem or not. So I went ahead and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some more images to our source library, because even though Lori has been, like I've trained it like another 6,000 or something since I made the last entry here, but you can see that Lori's face is still looking pretty squirrely, and I don't know that it's going to correct, even with that yaw setting enabled. It's like some of them still look really bad. Give it a second here. This figures it doesn't want to cycle around anymore and any more of them, but whatever. Yeah, see, like, look how bad that looks, because Kamala is looking up kind of at this funny cockeyed angle. She's looking kind of in this direction, and her head is tilted just enough that it's messing with the fact that I don't have anything of Lori looking in that direction. So I'm going to go over a process on how to add additional images to a source library so you can kind of correct for things like this. Hopefully the images I found will help. There's not a lot of footage of her looking kind of off up into space like that. So this is one of those scenarios where it can be difficult to make a source character match up with the destination. But what we'll do is I have a second set of folders for Deepface Lab. So you guys have been seeing what I've been working with, but I also have this one. I just call it DFL Stripper, which is Deepface Lab. I use it for stripping images out of other material to gain more source material. So I have already downloaded a bunch of images. I don't know what that is, but apparently it doesn't like that. So, but there's a bunch of different images of here in here. These, I mean, some of them, like that one, like this one, like if depending on how it works with like random flip and yaw, it might be able to use that. Some of these are pretty high resolution as well. I'm gonna have to, well, basically I can just remove when it finds the kid. I can take him back out of it. That's kind of funny is this almost looks like somebody deepfaked this kid, because you can see like there's a mask edge, and like it does, like where it like stops and goes right into his hairline. I think that is her, and somebody put a kid on her. That's funny. But anyways, like here, this kind of might work. Sort of the same angle. Just some different stuff I found. I think that's a copy of the one we had a minute ago. So different ones I found. Some of them are really high resolution. So anyways, you get the idea. So these aren't like video frames or anything, but they're still like JPEG images and PNG images from the web that I downloaded again from Google Image Search. So I don't have to make them into video frames or anything. I can just go in here and tell it to do a source facet extract. And again, this is a different set of folders. I just have a copy of all the Deepface Lab software in another set of folders. So that way I'm not because if you extract this into a aligned folder that already has images in it, it will overwrite them. And so we don't want to do that. We don't want to kill anything that we already have. We just want to add to it. So that's why I have a separate set of folders with all this stuff. So I'm going to tell it to go ahead, do the same thing we did before. 512 resolution, 100 quality JPEG, and let it extract. This shouldn't take very long at all because there's not that many in there. Like 31. Yeah, so that's not much. It'll take it just a second. Let's see here. I'm just answering some questions on a Discord server too. I'm doing this. That's kind of going slow for some reason. It might have something to do with some of those images being kind of high resolution. That, and it's finding more than one person in some of these, and that usually makes it take longer. That's sort of weird. You can see it's pulling the faces out, and like I say, some of these had more than one person, or it's getting some false positives. So it found 40 out of the 31 images that actually gave it, but that's not that big of a deal. So we'll go in here, we'll say _1, like we did before, to delete out our extras. Some of these. This already has an _1 on it. That's funny. That's why I got. That's interesting. I'll take that one out. That one's got to go, of course. That's not her. That's not her. Let's see. Get rid of you. That's a duplicate or something. I think it must have found it twice in the same image somehow, or maybe I had the same image in here twice. See, again, that's a duplicate. Sometimes I do that when I'm going out through Google image search. I end up finding things that, you know, like you're clicking through it and you don't think you've already grabbed that one and end up with it twice or something. So we've got all these in here. The next thing we can do is I'm just going to rename all of them something like the same thing. Basically, if you highlight all these, hit F2, it will allow you to change the name of one of them. And when you change the name, it'll apply that to all of them that you had highlighted. So now they're all named A1, A2, all the way up through A29. And nothing in my original align folder has a similar name to that, right? So these won't overwrite anything now that I've renamed them. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead like we normally do, and I can delete these source images now that I've got my aligned ones out of them. And I can go ahead and do, I guess we'll manually XSeg these. Well, we can try generic XSeg, but I don't know how good it's going to do on some of those angles she's looking at. But we'll try generic XSeg here on our source, because we can probably save some time that way. All right, sorry, I'm answering questions and stuff. All right, see, look how lovely and quick that was. Let's see how it looks. Which this should load quickly again, because this is only a small, in fact, that was instantaneous. Now the front facing ones, I'm not worried about too much. That's doing really quite well, actually. I don't know about side profile so much. Honestly, that's done a pretty good job. You can see it's really found the edge of her face and done a nice job of it. Now, generic XSeg mask is pretty good. Yeah, all right, I don't even need to manually do it this time, so that's great. So that's already done. I don't have to do anything else with that. Now, what I need to do, other than this, is go back in and I have to unpack my face set because I'm adding to it now, right? So I had previously packed up our source faces. I'm going to unpack them now, which is pretty quick, as you can see. Now if I go back in here and look at my alignments, see, now they're all unpacked again, as if we'd never done that. And all I have to do is take the images from my DFL stripper set of folders, alignment, and copy them over to my regular one. And now they're in there. They will be added into our training regimen. So back here, I'm going to repack, which again should not take it too long. Yep, it's going pretty quick. And once that's done, because I generic XSeg them over here, they remain XSegged when I move them over into my other folder as well. It's like like a metadata that's stored within the image file, the Deepface image file, that carries over. So even though I didn't XSeg it with these other images, they are still, the mask is still retained. So go back here again, and I'm going to start training again our SAEHD model. And at this point, we'll see what happens. It's going to take a little bit to pick up the new images and start working with them, and I'll be able to see, in a few thousand iterations, if it's kind of started to correct our problem or not. If not, I may have to look for more images again. This is like a troubleshooting step, as we discussed. When you find that you're not getting the results that you want and it's a little bit fuzzy. See, now this has just been added in and it doesn't know what that is yet. So this is the source image, and this is its first attempt at looking at that and figuring out what I've got there, and it doesn't know what it is, but it will of course improve with time. This is one of the ones we just added in. That's one of them we just added in. And so, like, the whole thing is kind of an amalgamation, if that's the word, of the images, all the images together. So that's another one I just added. See, this is some that I already had. This one I would have thought is at almost a good enough angle to work with Harris. Okay, now like I say, this is again what I was getting at, is how it's not doing a particularly good job yet. But with the stuff I just added and yaw enabled over enough time, I'm hoping that this will be corrected. And if not, I may have to perform the same steps again and try to find more source images where she's kind of looking up like this. I haven't been able to find a whole lot so far. That's why I went to Google image search. Lori is not there's not a ton of footage out there other than she's just giving speeches or she's having like press conferences or what the heck she's doing. And it's like she's kind of up on her pulpit looking down at a crowd. So she doesn't have a reason to be looking up, if that makes sense. So sometimes it's kind of hard to find footage of the person that you're working with. But that said, oh geez, that looks horrific, doesn't it? That was what first gave me the clue that I needed to work on this some more. So hopefully we can find something that will help fix this, or that what I've added is going to help. But if not, I will continue searching Google image search and looking for footage of her giving interviews or whatever that might improve this video a bit more, and we can add those as time, if I need to. But I'll be back again, and we'll check it out here when it's a little further along, and hopefully it corrects that problem. So I've decided to add a little bit more footage again because I don't know, like I said, I'm just having it doesn't seem like it's really fixing that problem we noticed for her face. Looked really kind of pixelated and wasn't really updating. So I went ahead and downloaded some more copied some more clips from YouTube using OBS and spliced them together with Adobe Premiere Pro, and the final result is this file here, which I'm going to name again data underscore source. And this is again in our DFL stripper folders. I've already deleted out the images that we had in there earlier, so it's all blank again. This is what I use these folders for, it's just for doing stuff like this. And specifically, this isn't super long, but there's a section, I think maybe that's not it. I got some side profiles. I'm going to grab that because I might need that for another video later or something. So I just added them now. So here she's kind of at a bit of an angle. It's like right there, you see she's at this angle, and if it flops that because it's doing the face source flip, I think that these angles here might be sufficient to solve our problem. And so this is the kind of stuff you have to start looking for, like in every video. Can I find, my source character doing things that I need them to do? So I will go ahead and do what we've done before, which is, again, extracting the images from the source, which this isn't super long, but it's more than we did a few minutes ago. But this is only like 30-45 seconds of video or something like that. But the same process before, we'll go ahead and extract all these images, and then I will extract the faces from the images and make sure that they're aligned good like we did the last couple times. I will probably try generic XSeg and see how that works, but if it doesn't, we'll probably have to manually XSeg some of those side profiles because side profile, especially like the background, I think is some of that is sort of similar to her skin tone. And when that happens, generic doesn't always do a great job of XSegging, but we'll try that here in a minute. So I'll be back in a second when this is all done extracting. We'll see how the XSeg goes. So give me a second, we'll do that, and then we'll get these added again to our source library and see if they help clear up our problem. Tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and do a manual extraction this time because side profile like this, sometimes it has a hard time getting it, or it'll appear to have done a good job and in fact it didn't. So this would be a good demonstration of extracting side profiles manually. So we will do source face extract manual, whole face, still 512, quality of 100, and we'll give this a try. There's about 1,300 of them, which I'm not going to do the whole thing on video, but I'm going to show you guys at least the side extraction, because earlier we did like a manual extraction of kind of straight on like this, but the side is a little bit different looking, so I kind of want you guys to see that. So again, this is I can either click with the left mouse button to select it, or I can unclick to deselect it. If I hit enter, it will just go on to the next. You can see her hands move a little bit because it moved on to the next frame. I'm just going to start hitting enter. You can see that the landmark mask, the eyes, the nose, the mouth are all in good positions. They're not misaligned or doing anything weird. My kitty in my lap here, he's wanting attention. You can see on the left over there it says 3%, and it kind of keeps going up as I'm doing this. I've done this before on videos that were like 15,000 manual extractions. That takes hours, but again, there's like large portions of it that it just won't do a good job unless you do it manually. Then you can do it automatically and then go back and refix anything that it does a poor job on. And I guess that's something I could show you guys too. That's something I meant to bring up, is how to manually fix a bad extraction. So that's something we should probably do too. My name is Lori and it's in slow-mo. So I don't know what it is about this. I find this kind of thing amusing when you're, it's in slow motion like this. We should be getting to the point where the side profiles here pretty quick. Oh, silly kitty. My kitty's all up in here getting his lovin's. Alright, so I could hit back arrow or the comma key if I want to go back and say like I screwed something up. Like if I had accidentally clicked over here or something, you see I just get a bunch of gobbledygook, and that will count as an aligned image that isn't any good to us. So like I say, I can go back and check and change things if I made a mistake, but I'll go ahead and go forward and we'll see. Okay, so it's doing an okay job of finding her face, which is doing a better job than I thought it would. I probably could have gotten away with doing this automatically. She's not super close to the camera here. You can see I've cropped out this image, so I did that in Adobe Premiere Pro, where the left and the right side are all blacked out, and the only person visible is Lori. So if I did want to run this to the automated face extractor, it wouldn't have the option to do anybody but Lori. But it seems like it's doing a pretty good job of finding it, which is, you can see the background. The tones are kind of similar to her skin tone, and sometimes that will cause a problem with the software doing a good job of finding and aligning correctly. But that said, give me a minute here, and I'll come back and we'll screw around with doing the XSegging and see if the generic's going to work or not for this side profile. So I'll be back in a minute. All right, so we've got Lori extracted, including our side profiles here, which is a pretty fair amount. That should help with further videos down the road if I want to use her again as a source character. So I'm going to do my generic XSeg apply, which I seem to be spacing out. Here it is. And we'll see how well that works with those side profiles. But if it doesn't work, I'm going to have to manually XSeg this round and we'll see how all that pans out. So it's going pretty quick. Like I say, generic is pretty nice to save you time if it works. Even if it works on most of it, if not all of it, you know, if you want to dealing with source images, you can just delete a few of them if you feel like, you know, they didn't get XSeg that good. You're not really going to lose much. Okay, almost there. All right, let's go have a look at it and see how that worked out. So again, we're going to look at our source mask edit for XSeg and see. Now, I've already renamed all the files because, as I said before, I'll have to put those, or, you know, rename them to put them in with the other ones. And I already named a bunch of them A, so I named these ones B. Oh, hold on, I'm in. All right. Somehow, like, they somehow end up getting sort of reorganized in here when you name something else like that. I don't know why it does that, but it doesn't really hurt anything. It's just sort of weird. So far, it looks like it did a pretty good job. Let's see. I mean, it is a little difficult to tell where her jaw and her chin and stuff end and begin here, so that's not too bad. I want to see how those side profiles are doing. That's more my concern here than anything else. So, jumping ahead. Surprisingly, it did pretty good again. I mean, it's not like perfectly uniform every time. It's a little bit different each time, but when you go to merge, you'll do what's called like erosion and blur mask a little bit. And a lot of this is going to kind of get chopped off anyway, so it sort of blends into the face. So even if it catches a little bit of the hairline, it's not the end of the world because it'll end up getting removed when you go to merge your masks. So honestly, pretty, hold on, let me go back. That was, that's not so amazing, but the vast majority of them look all right. I think that it'll be okay overall. There's a couple of them, like I said, that aren't great, but it'll extrapolate from the ones that are good onto the ones that are not good. Let me go back a second. There's this part where her hand is kind of up by her face. It still did a good job of telling the difference, didn't it? All right. Generic for the win. All right. I don't really see any reason to doubt it at this point. I think those will be all right. So from the stripper folder, oh, sorry. Grab our source alignments again. And again, I'm going to have to extract the face set because it's been repackaged here. Many times as I'm doing this, you'd almost think that this is not really any faster at this point. So let's add our new aligned images into our existing supply by copying from the stripper align folder to our previous, you know, our total align folder, our folder that we're working with, the align folder and our folders. And here we are. We've got our new images in there. Now, the other thing we talked about a minute ago was like redoing an alignment that came out bad. I don't think I actually have any that came out bad, but I can still show you guys how to do that because it's useful information and you may end up having to do it. So, for source, I mean, with source images, you can just delete a bad source image and it's not that big of a deal. But if you have a destination extraction that goes bad, every destination image has to be aligned correctly or reasonably well, because if it's not, then like you can't just delete that frame because then it won't be in the final video. So what we have for this is they have the aligned debug folder. So you go into data DST, aligned debug, and you can open up these images and start looking and seeing how well it aligned these masks. Now you can see here, these are this is the area that mine is having the problem with, as we're kind of looking up there like that. Let's just say I wanted to redo these. Now this is going to result in me having to like re-XSeg these as well. When you remove them, they're literally deleted and have to be redone. So let's I don't want to do any of them that has like the words over her face, because then I'll have to redo like that XSegging. I don't want to do that manually. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete a couple of these. We'll just say that they didn't come out good. So I've deleted those images, and I can close this out and go back out into our main folder and say data DST face set manual re-extract deleted align debug. That's one of the number 5 batch files. And we'll go ahead and tell it to do the same thing. And it's going to find the 4 that we deleted and bring up our manual extractor utility here in a second. And I can go through and say, oh, I made a mistake and I want to fix my mistake. So 2, 3, 4. And voila, it has recovered those, and they'll be back in again as if we had never deleted them. So when you delete the debug one, it will delete the alignment from here as well, and then you run that batch file and you re-extract, and it replaces it with whatever image is newly generated from your manual extraction, which is useful. Like I say, if it made a mistake, or if you use the automated extractor instead of doing it manually, and you got a bad alignment and one of these is really cockeyed or on its side or something weird like that, and you needed to redo it, that's how you redo it. So I need to redo the generic XSegging for Harris. So she's our destination. So we need to generic XSeg DST, which should not take it very long. And I can verify that it has properly fixed her mask from the ones that I deleted. So let's go ahead and look at that. Oh, wrong button. I'm probably not doing myself any favors by having done that, because remember, yeah, I sort of goofed up because now it's kind of got her neck in there again. Well, there again, with eroding it, using the erosion mask and stuff, it's probably not that big of a deal. But I'll probably, outside of this, go back and like retrain XSeg, like the regular XSeg training, and reapply that real quick, because those little neck alignments are not so great. So I'm going to go ahead and redo this again and let it train to fix those little blur, little bleeds into her neck there. And we've gone over this before, but I'll go ahead and show you guys what this looks like one more time. Loading, loading, loading. Your life will be all about loading and waiting. Okay, and it's about to load. And it'll be almost instantaneous. Like, I gotta let this train for like 2 seconds, really. And it'll probably will have fixed whatever, like, generically XSegging it just did. But I'll let that go for a second. When this is done, I'll get out of this. I'll again apply XSeg training using our destination mask apply, and it will correct those little neck seams that we just saw. So I'll do that, and then I will repack my faces, my source line faces, and I'll start training again. So if there's any questions about any of this stuff, let me know in the comment section below. Hopefully I'm not doing this too fast. I understand that there's a lot of steps and all this stuff, and I'm sort of breezing through it, but I am trying to take my time with it to explain it. But I've done a lot of this stuff like 1,000 times, so I have to slow down and remember to explain everything. Let me know if there's any questions at this point, but I'll go ahead and continue to train, and we'll see if any of this, like this imagery right here, is our problem, that hopefully this gets resolved, with some of the images we just added once they're better learned by the SAEHD training. So come back to this a little bit. So it is now Monday morning, the 13th, and we're at about 144,000 iterations of training. And it seems like it's finally, I mean, you can tell it's not like great, but it is starting to finally get that facial expression a little bit better. That's a little weird. Like there's really no reason it shouldn't be able to learn that one. It is having some strange results on certain frames for some reason. And what I did, besides adding more source images, see, that's still not great, but I think it's going to improve enough that this is literally like a second of video where she turns her face and looks down. And as long as it's even reasonably good, like you won't notice it once it's merged. But I'd like it to improve a lot more than that, of course. You can see a lot of them are getting pretty good, though. And this isn't even with any kind of settings beyond the base default settings. And it's only at 144,000. I'm going to let it go all day during work today. And when I get home, it should be over 200,000. And at that point, I think it'll be maybe ready to go to the next stage. But one thing that I did, which I'm not going to actually run through it here, but I'll just show you guys the settings. So there's the data source sort setting that I hadn't played with before, and I'm not going to run it because I'm currently already training this, but there's different options on how you want it to sort the source library. So you can sort it by blur, motion blur, yaw direction, pitch direction, rectangle size, and source image. I think that has to do with like how close the face is or something when it extracts it. I'm not sure, like histogram, like lighting similarities, dissimilarities, brightness, hue, amount of black pixels, file names. Like they can sort by a bunch of different things, but I told it to sort by best faces. If you do faster, it doesn't discriminate as much. This took a little while. I've got about close to 7,000 images that I was using. I said to pick like the best out of 5,000, and so you hit 13 and tell it to run, and it'll just do a little progress bar that takes a while. But the result is you end up with what it calls a line trash. And so it kept like 3,200 of those images, and of the remainder, it considered these to be lower quality for some reason. I honestly don't even know if I agree with it, because these are actually pretty decent quality, and for some reason it's using some that aren't. But there again, I sorted it by yaw earlier, and now I sorted like by, again, supposedly the best ones. I think it's finding the best of like each alignment and facial expression. So you can kind of see it just basically rotates as we go through here. She starts by looking left and ends by looking right. And it seems like doing some of that may have kind of corrected some of the weird results I was getting with these facial expressions. And so sometimes you just have to play with it. And like I tried re-extracting even the entire set of Kamala faces to see if it would solve that problem, and it still didn't work. And I've added a bunch of sources that I thought were pretty close to how she's looking at that angle, and like it still wasn't fixing the problem. I don't really understand what was going on, but yeah, see, I still got one of them that isn't great. Like you randomly stop on it, and I don't understand really why, because I've got plenty of them that look like this, and they're all good over here, but like one of them isn't. And it doesn't seem to be a whole lot of sense as to why it's not getting that one. I'm hoping over time with more training here, again, get up to get a little over 200,000 iterations, and that'll clear up on it for us. This is, a long process. There's troubleshooting involved when things aren't quite working right. You just got to kind of play around with it a little bit, but usually it's a little bit more straightforward than this. I don't quite know why that one facial expression is giving it so much trouble, but that's where we're at. Going on 145,000 iterations now. That's training pretty quick, and like I say, after work today it'll be over 200,000, and we can see where we're at that point. So I'll be back when I have more progress to show. All right, this is getting close enough to 200,000. Like I said, I think it's learn the source and destination about as well as it's going to learn at this point with the settings that we're on. If you notice, I've got more faces here. I changed one of the settings in like one of the the internal folders to show more samples at a time so I can make more comparisons without having to cycle through it so much. But I think it's largely about as good as it's going to get at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save and stop this, and then we'll start it back up again, but with a different setting changed. We're going to enable learning rate drop off. So basically, the way it works, as far as I can tell, is as long as you're at the default settings, which is like random warp on, so your resolution, all these other things, but like mask training, etc., is fine. But if random warp is on and learning rate dropout and GAN are off, it can learn new situations well. It can pick up new lighting conditions, facial expressions, all these different things, skin tones. But the moment you start enabling things like learning rate dropout, it loses the ability to learn so much and becomes more about sharpening up the images it's already learned. So next thing I'm going to do is restart again with train SAEHD. Still same thing. When it comes up and asks this, I'll hit enter real quick so I can override model settings. I'm going to go ahead and leave that the same. I have to lower this down now because once you start doing learning rate dropout and then especially GAN, they will use more video memory. I don't know that learning rate dropout uses a ton. I might play around with the batch size later and see if I can turn it back up a little bit, but I'll set it down to 4 for now because I know that'll work. Masked training, and this is just from experience because I know how much, roughly what I can do with my 24 gigs. Whatever you guys end up doing, you're going to have to do, if you don't have a 3090 or higher memory amount, you're going to have to probably almost certainly go lower than 512 resolution. I think we talked about that earlier. I've been doing this for days now on, making this video, so I forget what we talked about. Sorry. So mask training, yes. Eyes prio, mouth prio, yes. I'll leave that on. Blur out mask we'll still do later. Leaving that on the GPU. Aided belief optimizer still on. Okay, we're changing. So look, we'll read this again, but it says, when the face is trained enough, you can enable this option to get extra sharpness and reduce the subpixel shake. Subpixel shake, I think I mentioned what that kind of, it looks kind of like sometimes something's moving around a little bit underneath the mask. Like it's just like pixelated movements or something, or like jitteriness. It's hard to explain unless you see it. But anyways, it says enable it before you disable random warp and then before GAN. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this on. And we're going to leave this on for a while, still leaving random warp on. Later we'll shut off random warp, train again for a while, and then finally at the end we'll turn on GAN and let GAN run until it's finished, which could take quite a while. But once GAN is done, it should achieve whatever the height of sharpness is it's going to get to. So we're still not using that. GAN's still off, face still off, power, etc. Okay, I already turned on clipping gradient earlier because I thought with some of those weird facial anomalies I was having that the model might be collapsing, but I don't think that made any difference really. But remember that reduces the chance of model collapse, but slows down your training just a little bit. And we'll leave pre-training off now, of course, because if we went back to that, we would lose our progress. So ignore some of this stuff here. I was debugging using some aligned images. So they're in there, but it doesn't recognize them as Deepface Lab images. So I need to delete those back out. I forgot to do that, but just ignore those. It's only going to load the proper samples, which is about 3,200 something right now. Oh, getting late. 10:30. All right. So, I mean, you're not going to be able to see any difference for a while. It'll be noticeable, after, let's just say, this is one of the images that is not sharp. This is very strange, but you can see it clearly here. This is fine. This is fine. This is kind of a blurry mess. Like you can sort of see her facial expression, but I don't understand why certain images are not working. That's why I had some debug images up. I don't understand why like just a couple of these source images are not getting better, for lack of a better way of putting it. But that said, this is going to take a while, let this go for a while, but it will start sharpening up, let's by tomorrow morning, because it's about 10:30 p.m. right now. by tomorrow morning, let's just say it's done maybe 50, 60,000 iterations. So about, let's say about 250 to 260K. And at that point, it'll have sharpened up, quite a bit more. Well, these already honestly look pretty good. Like I haven't really seen with default settings it get as good as this has gotten. I've had it running at batch 6 pretty much, 4 and 6 for the most part. And so the number of iterations is kind of misleading because if I had running it at batch 2, I'd have way more iterations but no more work done. So for only 200K, see, I'm still got this one we talked about. Still looks like she's some kind of a mummy or something that came out of a crypt. I don't know why it does that, but when I go to merge it, it isn't actually a problem. So I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to ignore it. But I don't know why it's still doing that. I haven't been able to get rid of that. Her eyes are already even starting to sharpen up quite a bit. Like, look, you can see like the little reflections of light in her eyes. Usually you don't get some of this stuff till you get to GAN. So that's kind of cool that this is doing pretty good, especially since some of this source material really isn't all that great. Like this is pretty cheesy source material here. Like really, you try to get pretty good quality HD. Like these ones are good. This one's good. This ones are okay. But the like some of these when she was giving that speech are pretty low res. But that said, like I say, next up, we'll let this train until I think learning rate dropout is done what it's going to do. And then we'll disable random warp after that. We'll train again for a while, and then we'll go to GAN. So see you guys when it's done with this phase. All right, so we're at 251,738 iterations here. And you can see really, it's still occasionally doing like this weird, like this kind of glossy eyed looking crap in the training window. I honestly think at this point there's like just some kind of a visual bug in the training window because it doesn't seem to translate to the final product. It's, yeah, again, like here it looks kind of crappy, but when I go to actually use it, it's fine. So I don't really know what the deal is, but I think this is trained long enough with the random warp on and learning rate dropout on. I'm going to turn off random warp now, and we're going to go ahead and continue on from there until maybe 300,000, 300 some odd thousand, which by tomorrow morning, like it's 10:36 at night right now, I'm going to change this setting, and by morning it should be more like 320,000 or something like that, depending how fast it trains. And then after that, we should be able to enable GAN, or maybe wait till after I get off work tomorrow and then enable GAN. But we're getting in that ballpark after maybe this next, tonight, overnight, and then maybe like I say at work tomorrow, and then I come home and I can enable GAN and then train that for a couple days, and it should probably be done. And it may go faster than I thought. Like I said, this has been going kind of quicker than usual in terms of producing a good result. I think it's because it's such a small destination video that it didn't take it long to learn that. Maybe if I'd started with this like I really should have spent more time kind of finding better source material for Lori before I even started making the video, because there's better videos out there like I found later that I could have used that probably would have been a sharper result. But I mean, this is for learning purposes, so it's not that big of a deal. But next time, if I make another tutorial of some kind, I'll try to be a little bit more selective about my source material. But that said, we're going to go ahead and do train SAE-HD again. And we're going to change a setting here. So we have to enter really quick. When this says enter, hit enter in 2 seconds, they mean like probably less than 2 seconds or it just starts going. So continuing down here, I'm just doing batch 2 right now. It seems like that's going at a pretty good rate and still producing a good result. Mass training, yes. Eye, mouth, priority, yes. Uniform, yes. Blur mask, we don't care yet. Okay, we're still making... Okay, so we've got learning rate on. We want to shut random warp off now. And then we're going to go ahead and leave everything else as it is. And then later, eventually I'll be enabling GAN at 0.1, and that's the recommended setting, and leaving everything else after that. And that will be the final setting that we screw with. And at that point, it'll start sharpening up more drastically. I'll kind of get, when this comes up here, I'll kind of tell you what I mean. I currently don't have this in a face set. I unpacked the faces again because I was trying to find images that would help clear up that little weird blurriness that I've been seeing, and nothing's worked. Like I say, it just seems like it's a glitch in the training window more than anything. Like this again, it should have it's got to be like a training glitch or something with the window. I've had that problem too many times. And again, I think I was telling you guys, like somebody was telling me they think that for some reason um, that this particular program has a little bit of trouble reading people with darker skin tones. So that's possibly something to do with it. Because it's been like most of it's fine. Like see all this stuff's fine, but occasionally there'll be one with like even that one's getting better now, and it was having problems with this one like an hour ago. So this is getting corrected. But that some of these have a problem with darker skin tone, and like you get like weird smeared results that just look strange. Like this isn't perfect, but it's not too bad. So we're not going to be able to see any major difference right now. It's going to, by the time I get up tomorrow, it'll probably have sharpened up a fair deal more. But what I was saying earlier about when you enable GAN, let me go back here, sorry. So I want to find one of these where it's got a pretty good amount of detail. Yeah, like this. Okay, for example. Now you can see already, like around the eyes, she's got like a mole here or something like that. And it's starting to pick that up with learning rate dropout enabled. Because when I just had random warp and no learning rate dropout, you couldn't get those kind of details. So learning rate is starting to pick up and sharpen around the eyes. You're getting more detail about her eyelids, her forehead, and so forth. But GAN should be able to learn all of this 100%. Like all of this, like the facial details and stuff like that, or close to 100%. We'll just say like 98 to 95 to 98%, if not 100% of the detail should be able to be brought over from here to the predicted destination. And then when you merge it, it should look quite a bit better. So that can take a while. And when I enable GAN, you're going to get kind of this weird, you see like this area around here that looks kind of like, oh, I don't know, like a checkerboarding or something like that, or a grid. Like you'll start to see that kind of appearing over the face, but in like finer detail than this, and not like the weird colors. It's just kind of like a little grid appearance sort of over the face, and that'll kind of come and go as I train it for a while. Eventually it will go away entirely, and when it goes away entirely, the face will be a sharpened result. It's like it takes, again, it can take a day or two, if not more than that, depending on how fast it's training and all these different factors. But it can definitely take it a while. But once it's done, you should basically, again, this is another one that's quite sharp and has good detail in her skin tones and pigments and things like that, and wrinkles and every other thing that a person has. Here it looks obviously quite smooth yet, but once I enable GAN after it's trained again for a while with the current settings, this will be noted. Like we should be able to get pretty close to this as should appear over here. And then when I go to train it, it should get pretty close to looking like Lori Lightfoot over her. And then after we get all that done, I will show you guys the SAEHD merger process, which is this little batch file right here. And that is, I think I mentioned before, sort of a complicated process in the sense that there's a bunch of settings that you can mess with to make like little minute adjustments to how it appears when you merge it. Again, it's easier to show you than explain it. So when we get to that point in the video, you can see what I'm talking about. But there's all kinds of little settings that will kind of blur the edge of the face. So when it fits over Kamala's face, it'll look like it's naturally blended into the cheeks and things like that. And you can kind of erode it and blend it in different ways and change the color transfer mode. So like her facial skin, her skin tone is a little darker than Harris. So we got to screw around with that and try to get a good result there. There's just different things you'll have to mess with, but eventually, you just play with it until you get a good result, and then you finalize it. And once it's finalized, you convert it to an MP4 using this file, and you can do different options, but to upload to YouTube, MP4 is usually the way to go. So you convert to that, and then you're done. So again, after this, we'll be going to GAN probably tomorrow. And a couple days after that, like hopefully by this weekend, I can get this uploaded. Today's the 14th, and the weekend is on, like Friday I'm off again. So maybe Friday will be a day I can edit this or something. you know, like later in the day, and get it uploaded maybe Saturday on the 18th or something. That's good goal. I had originally wanted to get this done by the end of the month, so we're in that ballpark. But all right, we'll be back when it's time to enable GAN. All right, it is now about 8:30 in the morning on the 15th, Wednesday, and we've been letting it go overnight, so we're up to about 315,000 iterations, closer to 316, and it's kind of moving along. You can see the detail in the eyes are getting pretty good. About as sharp, I think, as this is gonna get. Probably that could probably go a little bit longer, but it's about learned what it's gonna learn for the destination and so forth. So like you can see, let me go back, sorry. I could have left it. But like you can see all the detail in Harris has pretty much been transposed over here to its prediction of Harris. So there's not really much more for it to learn about that. It's even got like all the subtle little wrinkles in her forehead and in her mouth, like in her lips and so forth. You can see every little nook and cranny in the skin. So I think we're going to go ahead and turn GAN on at this point. And then GAN will go until this is done. So give me a second here. I was running this at batch 3 last night. It was just about as fast as batch 2, so it would get a little bit more done per iteration, but I think it's going to be all right. Look at, I mean, getting pretty good detail here. Again, like there's that mole and all the little details around her face and so forth, her forehead. It's actually kind of, one thing about GAN is it will sometimes create detail where detail doesn't exist because it's AI and it's just extrapolating what it thinks should be there. So once we get to GAN and let it go for a while, usually it ends up being pretty much exactly like it, but sometimes there's like real subtle differences between like the source image and then the predicted image because it's just making it up. So moving through here, I'll probably stand back to 3 and see how that does for now. I still don't need blur out mask until I'm ready to go to the last step. Like I can turn on GAN and then later turn on blur out mask for like 30 minutes and it will blur the edges just fine and then I can continue. So keeping learning rate dropout on, keeping random warp off. So not screwing with that. Enabling GAN at 0.1. So we'll look at this again. Forces the neural network to learn small details of the face. Enable it only when the face is trained enough, with learning rate dropout on and random warp off, and don't disable it. Higher the value, the higher chance of artifacts. Typical find value is 0.1. I have tried going beyond 0.1, like I did a 0.2 or a 0.3 in the past, and it almost always just destroys the model. So I don't know why this can go all the way up to 5.0. I don't know how you would ever even utilize that or what scenario and that would actually work. I guess that's all like theoretical space, but when I tried it, again, like at like 2.2 or 0.3, eventually like the whole model looked like it was charring and turning like brownish black, and eventually the whole square just turned black, like it just kills it. So, oops, not 1.1. All right, and I'm not going to mess with the patch sizes, although you can increase these a little bit to get slightly sharper details. Higher the patch, the higher the quality, the more VRAM is required. You can get sharper edges even at the lowest setting. Typical find value is resolution divided by 8, which it sets for you. So in this case, 512 divided by 8 would be 64. But you can increase it to like, sometimes I'll increase it to like 80 or something, but I'm just going to leave it at default for this run. And we're still not going to mess with face style power. I think I mentioned before, like that seems like, yeah, like that increases its ability to learn like the colors of the destination face, but I don't think that we really need to screw with that. And it takes more time, and it has like it increases VRAM usage, takes longer to train, and it has a good chance of causing the model to collapse. So we don't want the model to collapse. So leaving that off, leave that off. Still not doing color transfer in here, and everything else as it currently is. So that's going to load up here. Now this, we won't be able to notice a difference for a little bit. And then like I said when I was talking about it last night, we're going to start seeing like little checkerboarding or grid lines or whatever you want to call it. Kind of looks like little tiling or scaling or something around the face, I'll show it to you guys when we get to the point where it starts doing it. For usually the first few thousand iterations of GAN, like you don't see that sort of thing, but eventually it'll start doing it. And so GAN is now enabled. And before I was running at with batch 3, it was getting there at about 450 to 500. Now we're doing the same batch 3, but it's now taking about 700 milliseconds per iteration. And the reason for that is because GAN definitely slows things down for you. So all these little details in her forehead, like little skin details, more on the eyes, just skin texture and things like that. Like this right here, you can see there's a texture to her skin, and over here, it's still fairly smooth and looks kind of like somebody just made her out of a lump of Play-Doh or something like that they smoothed out. But GAN should eventually start revealing these details in our destination. And once we get to the point where we're happy with however it looks, which all these things are kind of a judgment call. You just let it go until you think it looks good enough, and then you produce your results. So, I mean, there's no quote-unquote hard, fast rule or right answer. It's just let it go until you're pleased with the result. That's pretty much how it works. So, GAN is enabled. That's pretty much the last setting we're going to change, other than at some point when I think GAN looks good enough, I'll go ahead and enable that blur mask so it can blur the edges of the face into the destination, because basically there'll be kind of a fairly hard edge around the face, and sometimes because they have different sized faces, it doesn't fit perfectly. That's what blur mask does, is it kind of blurs the edges together so it looks smooth and looks natural, like it's really her face. So we'll be doing that at some point, but we gotta let this train for quite a while, probably till at least 450, 500,000 maybe, before GAN will be good. But we'll see, because again, this is a small destination. It might get there faster, but whatever. Today's Wednesday. Hopefully by Friday this will be at the point where I can call the deepfake portion training good, and we can go through the SAE-HD merger process and then spit out our final result and then get this up on YouTube. So we'll talk to you guys again when GAN looks like it's made some progress. All right, we're at about 370,000 on the iteration count, just shy. And it's been going all day at batch 3. I just changed it to 2, so this preview window would be a little bit larger here. And it's still kind of hard to see, but if you look at the neck, you can see a bunch of, like, it looks like little diamonds or something almost. And that pattern is kind of across the face, but it's harder to see, through the center of it. But that's GAN. Now you can see a lot better on here. Like, it's very prevalent here, but it's starting to learn more details, etc. And over time, that diamond pattern will go away, and we'll just be left with whatever the final product is, which hopefully is as close to the source material as possible. So that's at about 370,000. Hopefully by 500,000 or so, maybe 600,000 tops, it'll be at the point where we can use it and call it good. So that's where we're at now. I'll be back as progress continues. All right, so we're at going on 509,000 iterations. GAN has been running for some time. I think it's still running a little bit. Let me go back over here. It's hard to see. There's still like a very slight little bit of a diamond pattern happening only on some of the images, like the side profiles. Like you can see a little bit there through her cheek. And this isn't like picked up 100% of the detail over here yet. It's better than it was. Like we can see some veins in the forehead, and actually it's funny, it's like this line here isn't even noticeable here, or it doesn't exist there. And like I said, GAN just extrapolates details sometimes where it thinks that they should be. Like this is sometimes based on, and it's like an amalgamation of all the other source images that are also kind of her looking in that direction. So it might have picked up the vein from like a different image, and it's in this one now too. So you can see GAN here is a bit unfinished, and some of them probably aren't 100% done, but it's getting pretty close. And we don't actually even need these side profiles for the one that we're doing, since Harris throughout this entire DeepFake is going to be looking pretty much directly at the camera. I mean, here there's a little bit of that pattern still going, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and enable blur mask, because I think I'll turn that on, and I'll probably let this go overnight, and by tomorrow morning I think GAN will be about done, because it's pretty close right now. So we'll turn blur mask on. It's taking that a minute for some reason. So back into our SAE-HD training again. And we're going to tell it, just leave it at that for now. Blur mask, or blur out mask. Blurs nearby area outside of applied face of trained samples. The result is the background near the face is smoothed and less noticeable on swapped face. The exact XSeg mask and source and destination face set is required. So we've done our XSegging already, so we're going to go ahead and say yes. Place, yep, fine. Still good. Everything else should pretty much be correct. And one thing I may or may not end up doing is trying to screw around with color transfer, because there seems to be a fair enough difference between Lori's skin tone and Harris's skin tone that even though, like, I've played around with merging it already just to see how it's going to come out, and it does seem like maybe I might have to use this, but we'll see how it looks after we blur mask it, and I may not need to. So we won't be able to see a difference right off the bat on this, but this should load back up, and within a fairly short period of time it'll start being evident that I've enabled it in the training window, at least, where like everything around the face will kind of look like depth of field or something. So we'll see here in a second. Do it now, load it. Okay, so like I say, there's still pretty evidently some a little bit of GAN going on. Like the detail on this one isn't 100% of this, but it's pretty close. Like she's got some like freckling in her cheek here that isn't here, but that eye, like the eye area detail is pretty good. The teeth are all pretty well learned. Like that can be a problem if you don't have quite a bit of somebody where, like, some people for some reason, like, they don't talk with their mouth open very wide, and so like with Christian Bale, for example, if you watch the way he talks, it's like his mouth is never open that much unless he's like shouting or something, and so it's actually kind of hard to get images where he's just talking naturally and you can actually see inside of his mouth to get images with his teeth. I'd be pretty selective about looking for stuff with him, and it still had a hard time doing it. So anyways, it'll be a little bit before we can notice that this is going, but next thing I'll do, I guess I'll let this run overnight, and then tomorrow morning, Friday morning, we'll check it, but I think by then GAN should be about done. It'll be closer to 600,000 iterations at that point, maybe 570, 580, but close to 600,000. Blur mask will be prominent, and we can see at that point if we're ready to go ahead and call it good and do the merging. And once merging is done, we can output our final MPEG-4, and I can upload this video so you guys can watch it. So I'll see you guys in the morning. All right, I have since upgraded to Windows 11 since the last time you guys saw me, because I will be doing my 12900K here shortly, and I need to use Windows 11 for 11 for that. But anyways, picking up here. I think this is pretty close to as good as it's going to get, honestly. Like, if I let it go a bit longer, we might get a little more detail, but you can see, like, in the predicted mask, even, like, there's some facial forehead wrinkling being delineated here. You know, it's picked up the majority of the detail here. Like, there's still not all the skin texture. If I let it go, let's just say, like, 800,000, we'd probably get more, or, like, up to 1 million, it'd probably get a bit better. But we're sort of in that law of diminishing returns zone here, where, you know, how much of a difference would it make? That really, like, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I should have you know, taken more time to look for better source material of Lightfoot that would have made this probably come out a bit more detailed. But it doesn't look bad. It's just that a lot of it is like that speech she was giving, where it's kind of low res source imagery, and so this is what we got, is pretty much how it's going to look. We might get a little bit more forehead wrinkling, or, you know, details in the cheeks and stuff around the mouth, but this is pretty much where we're going to get with the material that we used. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to do the SAEHD merging process. So I hit enter, and this should save this. You can see it's saving it, and then we'll close it out. And we're going to get into SAEHD here in just a second. All right, so we're going to go through the merge SAEHD process. This is going to take a while. This is kind of complicated, but luckily we have a fairly short video, so it's not going to be ridiculously long, but just learning the settings is pretty long. So it's going to ask us the usual stuff, like what GPU we want to use. So of course we're going to use the only one that we have. And so it asks you if you want to use the interactive merger or not. I always use it because without it, you can't see like the settings that you're changing, what they're going to look like. The interactive merger is kind of like the window where we extracted faces manually. In fact, it's very similar to that. It's like a video preview window. Without that, you can just tell what settings to use and it will apply them to the whole video, but you have no way of knowing what it's going to look like until it spits out the file, and then if it looks bad, you got to do it again. Whereas with this, you can go like step by step, frame by frame through the video and decide if you like how it looks. And sometimes from one scene to another, it can change drastically. So the settings you used in one scene may not look so good in the next scene. You might have to tweak them a little bit. So I don't know why you would not use the interactive merger. So we're going to use that. Number of workers refers to your number of CPU cores that you have available, counting hyperthreading. So this is an i9-11900K. That's an 8-core, 16-thread CPU. So we're offered 16 workers. We'll use them all. It's going to collect the alignments. This refers to the number of images in the destination video. And I've been screwing with it, so it's asking me if I want to use my saved session, but I'm going to start over. I'll say no. Now there's 2 screens here that we have to screw with, plus we can see like what our settings are at any given time over here. So this is, again, there's a lot of steps here. Understand that there's hotkeys to all this, and once you memorize the hotkeys, you can do this pretty quickly, but it will take a while to get proficient with it. Don't feel bad if it takes a while. You can't apply any of these settings from this screen if you hit tab. So as it says, switch screens to the main and help screen. This is the help screen. This is the main screen. So you can see there's Lightfoot kind of on Kamala, but doesn't look good. We've got an obvious edge of the face here. This is what I was talking about earlier too, is that the color doesn't really match super good. So we might try doing a color transfer mode with some training and come back here to finish this a little bit later, but we'll see if we can do it for now. I can show you guys the process. Making it look good may come a little bit later, but so hit tab again to go back to the help screen. So what have we got? So this is the little tilde key that shows the original as opposed to any kind of deep faking you've been doing. So if I hit that, you can see it just shows the original footage instead of anything with Lori on it. If I hit 1, it does what's called overlay, which is it just lays the mask on top of the other person. So going back and forth, overlay or not overlay. 2 is histogram match. 3 is seamless. 4 is seamless histogram match. 5, raw RGB. 6, raw predict. So we'll show you what each one of those looks like. So this is again on overlay. 2 is histogram match. Sometimes this actually does look better. So this is like one of these things where you just have to play with it. Overlay for me, 99% of the time is the go-getter, but sometimes it's histogram match and sometimes it's seamless. Seamless, like here you might argue that looks better, and actually it kind of does. So maybe we'll go with seamless this time. You can see like here the edge is obvious on overlay, but I switched to seamless and that's already pretty well blended. The problem I've noticed with seamless is that there's sometimes parts that will look kind of clear, for lack of a better word. Like it doesn't always look good. So we'll have to see if that works well, but actually seamless right now looks like that might be the way we'll go. 4 is seamless histogram match, which again here doesn't look so great, but again sometimes it does. Like certain lighting conditions sometimes look better with a histogram match. So again, just play with it. What was 5? Was raw RGB, I believe. Oops, sorry, wrong button. Even I mess up the hotkeys sometimes. So yeah, raw RGB in this case refers to Like it just shows like from the training window, and it keeps the square on it, which looks kind of funny. I've seen people do videos like this to the whole thing just because it looks sort of hilarious. And then 6, it just does like it gets rid of everything in the training window or the merger window, and it just comes down to the square, like the training window square. So I'll go back to seamless, which was number 3 again, and it should bring us back. All right. We can change the scale of the window by pushing the plus or minus key. So minus, it gets smaller, plus it gets bigger. So if you're dealing with a sort of low res video or like you're trying to make the window fit your screen a bit better, you can fiddle with that to change the size. Okay, so this is histogram match threshold. I believe that changes only probably 2 and 4. So let's try 2, and it says to use Q and A. I almost never screw with some of these settings. Now if I hold down Q, so right now it's at the maximum of 255. If I hold down A, it goes down. Now we can kind of watch how it changes. Yeah, see, it does work. If I hold Shift and hit the button once, it goes by 5 instead of 1. So I can kind of hold down Shift and burn through a little faster. And really not particularly great what it's doing, but you can see how that's changing it. I can try it on the seamless histogram match. Actually, I mean, like, that doesn't look horrible. I think regular seamless looks better. It's really a slight change difference. So honestly, like I say, some of these are, more than one of these are viable options. So we've got, that's, oops, sorry, wrong button again. We were on seamless normally. Let me go back to the help screen. Next is erode mask and blur mask. And these are kind of bread and butter for making it look better, for like getting the edges to kind of meld together. So I'll go back to overlay so you can kind of watch what these do, but I usually don't use a ton of erode mask, but blur mask I do. And over here again, you can watch as the settings change. So if I hit, what the hell was it? Sorry, I'm just used to doing it and not looking at it. So W is erode mask. We'll see what that does. See, it kind of took off the edges of the face a bit, but it still has kind of a sharp edge because it's not blur, it's just eroding the size of the mask. We can actually send it in the other direction and go negative with it, and it will make the mask go out further. See, it's actually extending out into the destination mask, even though there's really nothing for it. So you can see here, like the edge of her face, and then additional content that doesn't exist because that's not part of Lori's face. So we're not really going to keep that. I usually don't even use that. Or sometimes I might set it to like -5 or +5, depending on it, if it helps it a little bit to kind of smooth the edge of the face. Erode mask, I use around, I don't know, it kind of varies, but like you can see how that softened the edge immediately. I'll go a little further. And I can kind of, you can go all the way up to 400 with that. But usually somewhere between 1 and 200 I find does a pretty good job. And if I enable that and then I go to seamless, for example, now that's like sort of the interesting thing. You can see now it doesn't look so good. If I go down a bit, seamless kind of changes the color palette a little bit. The more you blur it and erode it, it seems like seamless can sometimes look better or worse. Again, this is all just playing around with settings, finding what you think makes yours look better or acceptable to you. So we're on overlay, seamless, histogram match, seamless histogram match, which that looks pretty horrific, frankly. So I think I'll probably, at this point, now that I've blurred it enough, maybe I can blur it back a little bit and try it around 80. Trying to find a good point where seamless and that look all right together. Still not really that happy with like the edge of her face there. Try going that way with it. Yeah, you still got kind of a harsh edge there in the forehead. So honestly, like I say, it's just play with it, play with it, play with it until you like what you see. So I'll just go back to overlay and kind of smooth that edge out. That's probably okay. Your margin may vary. Okay, motion blur is only useful if like the person's moving their head around a lot. So we're not going to try to like enable that here because she's not moving enough for it to even show it doing anything. But you increase that a little bit, and then like as she turns her head too quickly or something, it will add sort of a motion blur effect to it. Super resolution is like a massive hog for training time, but it will sharpen the image up a lot. But it gets to the point where it looks like really, really unnatural if you do it too much. So like for right now, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit so we can kind of watch as that takes effect. So super resolution is T to increase, G to decrease. So I'll do like 10 or 15 or something. Let's just go to 20. We should be able to see pretty immediate sharpening. Now you can see it definitely sharpened up. And this is still, like around the nose, you can see like some pixelation and stuff. It's like it's too much. I found that super resolution is really not that useful on models much. You know, like this is a 512 resolution model. I don't really use super resolution much, if at all, at 512. At 640, you definitely don't need it. At least I have not. Other settings, we've got blur and sharpen modes and face scale. So blur sharpen, you can do, let's see. So N changes the mode, Y increases, H decreases. So like right now, it's off. If I hit N, it'll say box or Gaussian. And I can, what was it again? Y and H. So I can kind of, I think, sharpen it up a little bit. And that might actually be, no, see, it definitely sharpened it, but I don't think it looks good. Again, it's just a matter of whether you think it really needs it. We could drop that down a little bit and decide if we think it helps it at all. But again, after a certain resolution, like any kind of sharpening filters, to me, just make it look pixelated and not really beneficial. Plus, I've already got super resolution still on. I'm going to shut that back off by hitting G a few times. And that's still got the sharpening filter on. I'm going to tell it no, none of that. So now it looks back to normal again. And face scale. So if you hit U, I believe, I can't remember which does which. J will make it bigger, U will make it smaller. And so it's weird, it's like -1, as you can see, and the output scale over here actually looks bigger. So I can hit that a couple of times. Sometimes it's useful, like if the person, like the source image face doesn't really fit the target person quite right, you can kind of screw with that and sort of get it to blend in a little bit better. We can go the other way with it and do something really silly, make her face look smaller. Oh no, she's become smaller. It looks really hilarious. Like, if you could make it off center or something and make it look like the person had two heads, that'd be kind of funny. And have them speak in unison, that would be kind of hilarious. I don't know why they don't let you do that. You should totally be able to move it. Whatever. So, oh, wrong way. Let's turn that back off. And now it's back to the appropriate size. Actually, I might go like 1 on it to try to fill it up. Yeah, see, it kind of fills in a little bit better if we go like +1 on that, or -1, but 1 bigger. Denoise, bicubic, and color degrade options. I usually use like 1 of each of these and none of these. It seems like it softens the edges a little bit, but we'll see what they do. So I is for denoise. So to increase denoise, like I'll go up to 80 on that. I don't know if it's really even noticeable what it's doing, honestly, after a certain point. As you can see, like every time I apply a setting, there's like a little hourglass up here. That gets to be your enemy after a while. When you start moving through the merging process, that gets to be. See, it starts to hang kind of a bit longer and longer. That doesn't really seem to even do that much. Now the other one was bicubic. If I do that, I think that kind of makes everything around the face sort of blur out. That's taking a while, like I said. Yeah, see that? That looks funny. There is only one Lightfoot. Oh, thank God. All right, so I'll bring that back down. But I usually will hit 1 of each, and like I say, I don't know if we'll be able to notice it or not. it wasn't so noticeable here. But I've noticed in the past that having each of these set to 1, it just seems like the edges of the face just soften ever so slightly, but that's, can be a good thing. Color degrade. Let's see what that does. I think it kind of makes it more towards like black and white. Oh, well, you can see what it did. It's just like the face is losing color quality. So that's P to increase, and I guess that's a colon to decrease it back down. Actually, it did to the whole thing. It didn't just do it to the face. Okay. So, what else do we do here? It doesn't... Oh, it actually does. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we got masked histogram match. I'm not sure what that actually does. If that even... I think you have to be on histogram power. And then... So I can hit Z, say mask match true, mask match false. Okay, well, it does change something, but whether or not there's any benefit to that, I couldn't tell you. And it doesn't look good for ours. Again, though, it might look good in certain situations, like depending on how it goes. Masked mode is... Okay, so this is an important setting. So right now, it's not using our XSeg version. It is using what it would do if you never XSegged it. It's just... it's predicting it, and it does a pretty good job usually. If there's nothing in the way, like remember as we get into this text is going to get in front of her chin, and if we don't XSeg, this will just end up in front of it, or be like it'll look like her chin is over the words. So there's different XSeg mask modes. Right now it's saying it's learned. I don't know what these, it's some kind of math, but it's like learned minus learned prediction times learned destination, I guess. But if I hit X, it'll change learn predicted plus learn destination. So it changes how it looks a little bit. And again, you can play with this to get, results that look better for your model. Now it's XSeg predicted. And then this XSeg destination. XSeg predicted times XSeg destination. And then there's like a really long one where it's XSeg predicted times learned destination times XSeg predict da 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 da. That, to me, this typically ends up being the best one. I almost always end up using that setting, or sometimes it's one of the earlier XSegs, depending on... You just got to play with it, see which looks best in certain scenarios, but that's usually the setting I go with. This is the final setting. If I hit it again, it'll go back to what it says, full, which is kind of like that full RGB we did. And then you can do it again. It'll just do what's called DST, which it doesn't do the forehead. It just does like the facial portion of it. And then we're back to where it started at, which was learn predicted. So I'm going to go ahead and get my setting back out to where I had it a second ago. And I might try blurring it just a little bit more. And it's not awful. I mean, the color you could argue isn't right. So that's the next thing is color transfer modes. And showing alpha mask, I'll look at show alpha mask, that's V. It just shows this out, the mask and then everything that isn't part of the mask. But color transfer mode. So it starts on RCT. Don't ask me what any of these things actually mean. I don't know. I just know they do different things. So having it off on none, which I'm hitting C to change that. Remember, C changes it. With none, this is how it looks naturally with no color transfer mode enabled. Then RCT, and again, this is just another play with it thing, but my experience has been that RCT, and then there's one further called MKL-M. Those are the two that I would call the best, that almost always do the best job. And then there's SOT-M, and it can do even better sometimes, but for some reason it makes the merging process take way longer. So, maybe it's useful to you, but like maybe you get the best result out of it if you don't mind waiting for it to merge. So this is LCT, and again, you just play with this until you find one you think looks good. It may add some more to definition sometimes, but it looks maybe less natural. MKL, then there's MKL-M. I don't think that looks that great, but IDT, IDT/M. Sometimes the IDT ones will add some reflectivity to it, so it'll look like a light source is, like their skin's kind of shiny. Here's SOT-M, and you'll see here it's taken a while just to even apply that. I don't know why we'll call it SOT. I don't know why SOT takes so long to apply, but it does. And again, this looks more or less what like RCT looked like in this case. So there's really no need to use it if it's going to take that long to merge it. Mix, which isn't amazing here either, but is an option. Let me try that with like seamless or something. No. Okay. I'll go back to RCT. That has been my experience. That and MKL are both pretty good. So I might, like I say, one thing that might help is to go back into SAEHD training and enable color transfer mode, either RCT or MKL in the actual training. And then once it does it in the training, you can come back here and enable it like a second time and you get kind of double the effect out of it. Sometimes that will improve how the thing looks, but for the sake of what we're doing here, I don't necessarily want to go back and screw with that right now. So we've covered what the different things do other than how to merge it. So this is not super complicated, but again, it kind of can be. This is referring to a shift key. So the up arrow is a shift key. If you're already somewhere into your video frames and you hold shift and hit M, it will apply all these settings that you have to the previous video frames in the video. If you hit shift and push, okay, so that's like a question mark or backslash key, or forward slash, I guess. It will apply these settings to every subsequent frame in the video. And then, so yeah, like the same, push shift plus this overrides configuration to the last frame. If you just hit forward slash, it will just apply it to the next frame of the video, but not the entire rest of the video. And if you just hit M, it will just apply it to the one previous frame, but not the entire previous frames. To progress or go backward in the video, you can push the comma and or period keys, which are basically arrows, so forward or back. So I'm going to push forward one, but I'm not applying my settings, right? So if I hit forward, but I don't apply my settings to it, I don't recall telling it to do it. Now it's making me feel stupid because it's seemingly kept my settings even though I didn't tell it to apply those settings. That's a little weird. That shouldn't have done that. It should be like, what the heck? Let me drop this down in size a little bit. Like when I jump to the next frame of video, this should all be going back to default settings because I didn't apply it to the entire video. Unless I did it just subconsciously. That's really strange. I wonder if it retained this from the last time I did this. Let me try changing just like one setting here. So we'll set that to full. And then I'll jump ahead by one. See, now it's doing it. So I don't know why they're applied to everything because it shouldn't be. I may have accidentally just done that because I'm so used to just hitting shift and hitting the forward slash to apply everything when I've got the settings how I want them. I may have done it, but I don't remember having done that. So that's strange. So sorry, weird. So I'll change this back to, yeah, that was the mask mode that I had changed to do that. So we'll put the mask mode back to this. And so now it's keeping all that. But what, like, okay, so let's just say I did want to change that for some reason. I'll do that again. But I'll hold shift and hit the forward slash. Then you can see this is going to take it a second to apply. It's applying these settings now to the entire video, right? And now if I hold forward, it will just continue on with that masked mode. So I'm just going back. I got a forward arrow, back arrow. But I want to go back to my different XSeg mode. So I'm going to go ahead and change that back on the first frame of the video. And I'm going to apply it to the rest of the video by holding shift and hitting forward slash or the question mark key. So I can hold down the arrow if I want and watch it go frame by frame, which you may end up having to do, like if the video is pretty complicated, you can see there's still like a little bit of this like diamond pattern. I don't think GAN is 100% done, and so it still has like little diamond patterns on stuff. It would improve a little bit, and those would go away over time. Maybe I'm just being impatient. Now, let's look at something here real quick. So like if I want, you can see here like the eyes, maybe I want to sharpen up how our eyes look a little bit. So I go and add a little super resolution at this point of the video or something, right? Let's see what that does. I don't know, I didn't see much change. Let's try going up to 20. Yeah, I mean there's a slight difference. Like the eyes look a little bit more delineated, and like the little reflections in her eyes and stuff you can kind of see a little bit better. Like previous frame, this frame, like there's a slight sharpness difference. Then if I go to the next frame, see it doesn't apply it. So 20 super res, previous frame, no super res. Next frame is no super res because it hasn't been applied. So what if I want to just apply it to like the next couple frames, right? Or like, let's say I wanted to put it on the previous frame. So if I hit M, so again, if I want to just override the config to the previous frame, I'll hit M. And it will go ahead and apply it just to the previous frame. So now I go back, well, okay, it does it, then it takes you there. So see, now it's applied for 2 frames, but not the one after that going forward. So what if I wanted to apply to the next one, I hit the / one time. Now I've got super resolution. It should be 1, 2, 3 frames of super resolution, then no super resolution. So I understand that like this gets really kind of tedious in the sense that you're, having to do like every frame of video. It gets really tedious when the video is like 5 to 10 minutes long and you're trying to change all these things. You can spend hours just trying to get one video to look really good to come out at the end. And this right here, you can kind of see where the mask and her hairline maybe aren't quite identical in color. I could feasibly blur that a little bit more. With super resolution enabled, everything takes longer to apply too. Like it'll hang, well, it didn't take too long. Probably because the video is not that long. I don't think that really looked that much different. You can kind of see it change a little bit. Like it's hard to tell maybe, but as I go from, zoom in a little bit further. If I go forward a frame or back a frame, you can kind of watch like that erosion or that blurring change just slightly. I think you can see it pretty well there. Like there's just a slight change in the blurring as I go 1 frame forward or back. So what if I wanted to apply all this to the beginning of the video? I can hold shift and push M. It will apply it all the way back to the beginning of the video, and it will take me to the beginning of the video. So then it'll have super resolution 20 all the way up to the beginning, and it will have the blur mask. But as we saw here, like at this angle, super res 20 doesn't look good. It looks better later in the video. So maybe what I'll do is I'll shut it off here. And I'll hold shift and hit / to apply my non-super res to the whole video. I'll then navigate to the point where I want to enable super resolution and then apply it from that point on for the rest of the video. So like I'll get down here, I'm just holding the forward arrow key. And see, it'll start hanging a little bit every few frames. The more settings you apply, the more blurring, the more different things, it takes it longer to process one frame to the next. So now I'm at the point where maybe I want to start using that super resolution, right? Because she's looking more at the camera now, and it looked okay from that angle. So I will go up to, like, let's just try 15. I don't think 15 made that big of a difference. And we'll do the 20 after all. So holding shift, hitting / and or your question mark key, same thing. It's now applying that 20 super resolution from this point in the video to the end of the video, but not to the beginning. So we had it off at the beginning. Now we're applying it on for the remainder of the video. And that is taking it a minute for sure. This is a very short video. It's like 15 seconds, and it still takes it quite a while to apply super resolution. And now you'll notice too, like I'm holding forward, and it's going to start hanging longer and getting stuck at various points because super res makes it take a lot longer to to merge each frame. So kind of slow, but we get to retain that extra sharpness. But here it's hanging now. Like I say, it'll eventually get out of that. See, it's back up again, but it'll start doing that pretty regularly, especially if you use super res. So the last possible thing we can do is if we would like it to go ahead and apply, let's see how to do this. It should say, okay. Yeah, process remaining frames is shift and the forward arrow key. So if I'm happy with these settings and I want it to just go ahead and apply them to the rest of the video, well, they're already applied, but if I want it to just merge the rest of the frames and get us to the end of this merging process without me having to sit here and hold this arrow key, I hold shift and I hit the period and or forward arrow key, and it'll just turn into a black window. But you can watch down here, it's at 21%. And it's starting to apply it frame by frame. It gives you a time estimate, but usually it's faster than it says it'll be. But oh, what if I realize that there's a part, like, oh, I didn't mean to apply those settings, or I want to go back. If you click on this and hit P, the P key, which it doesn't mention this in the tutorial window, I don't think, but it will say, oh, okay, he didn't mean to keep going, and it'll stop and let me go back and change something. See, it brought it back up. And now I can start making different setting applications again. And actually, her eyes look pretty good. Really, again, we could have let it train a little bit longer to get rid of some of these GAN marks, but learning process. So let's just say, I don't want to do the super resolution after all. I think it's going to take too long to train, or it doesn't really help the way it looks. I can shut it off and then hold shift and hit / to apply that change to the rest of the video. Which it's still taking a minute to do that. And then hold shift and hit the forward arrow key again to resume my merging, but it should merge quite a bit faster with super resolution turned off. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of pause the recording here while this finishes. Now, when it says no faces like this is good. I should stay in here. When it says no faces, what it means is that it's at a part in the video where Harris wasn't in it. So like when she's talking to the kids in this video, whenever the kid is the focus and there's no masks that need to be merged, it'll just say no faces found. That's why, like, quite often it's faster than it gives you a time estimate for, because any section of the video where your character isn't there, it will just shoot through that because there's nothing for it to do. So anyways, I'll be back here in just a second when this finishes. All right, well, that was actually pretty quick. It only took it like a minute there. So anyways, once it says it's at 100% and it's no longer progressing or anything, the little hourglass will go away. You're just left with this black window. So hit escape and it will say session saved and that you're done, and you can hit enter. And the last step at that point will be to merge it into an MPEG-4. So we double click on that. You can do lossless. That just takes longer, makes a bigger file size, all that good stuff. And you can pick the bit rate. I'll just set it to like 24 or something like that, but 16 is usually fine. And it will run through this, which for us should take almost no time at all. It does 2 passes, so it's going to go through however many frames it has to do, but because this is such a short video, our deepfake is very short. I think it's only like 300 some odd actual frames or something. Whatever it is. Yeah, see, it's done. It'll go through it one more time. This is one of those things where, like, having a CPU with more cores is beneficial, especially if it's a longer video. Like the Threadripper does this quite a bit faster than the 11900K. Hoping my 12900K that I can put in there possibly tomorrow will do a better job still. Okay, so that's done. And the last thing you do now, you can go into your workspace folder, and it's called the file result. And we should be able to watch our completed deepfake, which I guess is only about 12 seconds. I thought it was 15 seconds. Whatever.
Well, what did you do about that? Stop it. Just put that game. Stop.
So, I mean, that's ultra short, and obviously the result isn't like amazing. More training and again, I could go back and try doing some more SAEHD training with the color transfer mode enabled. Maybe what I'll do is I'll go ahead and do that here real quick off, sort of off camera, and try to get a better result with the merger, and then show you guys if it makes any improvements. So I'll be back here in a little bit. I'll try that. I guess I'll show you guys really quick how to apply that setting, so I'm not leaving you wondering where it was at again. So we're just going to go down through our list. We're going to find the color transfer mode, and since we were already using RCT, we'll just enable RCT again in here, and we'll see how this pans out and see if it helps us at all. And what will happen is when the training window comes up, like it's been doing, and shows us our comparison images, they'll take on kind of like a Reddit or something like a yellowish, orangish hue, which will look kind of weird, but it's just how it looks when you're doing a color transfer. So give that a second. It may take it a minute. Well, I mean, you can already kind of tell there's some difference between like this color and this color. I guess maybe the transfer, I mean, it's taken on kind of a different tone to it, but it may look a little bit different applied to someone with a darker skin tone than what I'm used to seeing on here. So, see, kind of a yellowish tone it's starting to pick up there anyway. All right, I'm gonna let that run for a little bit just so it kind of proliferates it, and then I will attempt to merge it again, and we can see if it looks better when we get the finalized product. So I'll be back a little bit after it does that. All right, guys, so I went and tried the color transfer mode change. It really didn't help it to speak of, so this would be one of those situations where you either just kind of have to live with the results or train it longer and see if it gets better, or more than likely, again, we used, I used some pretty basic quality source material, at least from that long speech she's giving. And later I found videos that probably would have worked better. So it's my fault for not preparing better source material that might have done a better job. It just didn't end up looking all that amazing, but you get the general idea. This is for learning purposes only. Understand that, if you want to let it keep training out to a couple million iterations, you'll probably get better results. How much better, like I say, you're sort of getting to that law of diminishing returns, but if you're not happy with how it looks, you could try rolling back your model to earlier in the training and adding some more source images. So basically what you should do, and this is kind of like our final commentary section here, is back up your model before you start enabling things like learning rate drop off or GAN. I did do that, and I don't think I mentioned it, but I did do it in my folder. So this is a different one. This is just another backup I have for Morgan Freeman, but I wanted to use this to show you guys like basically the settings you're going to screw with. So to recap, the order of operations for making a deepfake is you start off by choosing your resolution, picking your whole face, all this different settings you're going to go with, dimensions as we talked about, mask training on, pick whether or not you want the yaw setting on or off, depending on if you have a lot of side profile images of the person. Learning rate dropout off, random warp on, no GAN. The rest of the stuff off. You can pre-train if you want. You don't have to pre-train. That's optional. Some people swear by it. I personally don't notice a huge difference, if any. So your call on the pre-training. But these are the default settings right here that you start with. Again, resolution, etc. Random warp on, learning rate, and GAN off. After you train it up to the point where you think it's not going to learn anymore, which is kind of a judgment call as we talked about, but as it improves and improves over time, you'll see kind of, like I say, a lot of diminishing returns where it looks about as good as you think it's going to get. The history bar, the yellow history bar, will get pretty tight and low in the graph towards the right of it, as we talked about earlier with the history bar. So that's something to look for. And once you get to that point, you'll say, okay, next thing you'll do is you will turn on learning rate dropout, but you'll still leave random warp on. Let that train for 100, 200,000 iterations, however long, again, it takes until you think it's not going to improve anymore. Then you go back in, you shut off random warp, turn this to false, let it train for a while longer, and then finally enable GAN at 0.1. So you change, GAN to 0.1 and let that train until it's basically done. And then at the end, if you want to use things like blur mask, like we talked about, to kind of smooth the edges of the mask out, you can do that. If you need color transfer, like we talked about, you need to do that. Also, forgot, when enabling GAN, you want to enable clip gradient. Sorry, bleh. Yeah, to prevent model collapse, you enable clip guard. So I guess at this point, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of questions. Again, I think it could have come out better if I had trained it maybe a bit longer and gone with better source material. That's my fault again for not picking better source material. So, want to ding me for that, I wouldn't blame you. But ultimately, you see the process. It's just kind of refinement. If indeed, like I say, if for some reason you're not happy with the way it's going, you can always roll back your model. If you back it up when you're still at these default settings, and make another folder and just save the model files like this. So save everything down to where it says summary for all these different model files. It's pre-gamut. I've got GAN in there. That's a little weird. That's whatever. That's Morgan Freeman's folder. But like I said, back up your model files, and then from that point on, you can start using that training point again. If you want to add different images into it, like we talked about earlier, how to add more images. When I was screwing around trying to fix that weird problem going on in the training window, I added more images using that second folder that we called DFL stripper, like we went through there, and we were stripping out extra source images to add to our library to improve it, etc., until you end up with something you're pleased with. So I know a lot of this is sort of vague, but it's kind of like troubleshooting and just playing with it until you get what you like. It's not anything beyond that other than just playing with it until you get to the desired outcome. So I hope this has been a helpful walkthrough for everybody. I'm going to try to break this into chapters so people can search through it and get what they want without having to watch the whole video, because I know it's been long. But that said, if you like the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it with people who might be interested in it. That would help me out a little bit with the algorithm, that kind of thing. But otherwise, I'll talk to you guys again real soon. I'll have another actual deepfake out here in the near future. I'm working on one with Patrick Stewart again, so we'll see you guys here in the future. Later.
I want to have a social worker in every public school. Not being mean.
What would you do about that?
I would stop it.
Just put that game in me.